Emery woke to a cool, gray ceiling. The moment he tried to move, a wave of sharp pain lanced through his body. He groaned. "You're awake." The voice was soft, melodic. Emery turned his head to see Clea sitting at his bedside. The usual fire in her eyes was gone, replaced with quiet worry as she gazed at the rain sliding down the window. The others were there too, Julian seated beside her, Thrax sitting cross-legged on the floor, and Chumo leaning silently against the doorframe. Though the room glowed with lamplight, the world outside was already dark. Evening had fallen while Emery slept. He forced himself upright, clutching his aching head. The memories came back in fragments, defeating the puppets, reaching level 3, then an axe striking, everything after blurred. A sigh escaped him. Half a day lost. Tomorrow would mark the 5th day of their trials, leaving only 2 more to prove himself. He looked at his hand, and the glowing script appeared. Emery Ambrose, 15 years old. Battle power, 11. Spirit power, 24. His eyes widened. The increase in battle power he could explain, but spirit power? He asked his friends, but all 3 only shook their heads. A surge of hope filled him, yet it was short-lived. To remain at Magus Academy, he needed at least 30 spirit power. Without it, he would be sent home in disgrace. Worse, all his friends had already advanced beyond him. Clea was rank 3. Julian, Thrax, and Chumo had reached rank 2. Emery was still rank 1, perhaps the only one left in the academy. Julian, reading his expression, spoke. "Consider yourself lucky, Emery. Otherwise..." Chumo drew a finger across his throat. "Right," Julian continued grimly. "Dead. While you were unconscious, 3 others attempted the gauntlet. Split in half after their protectors were used. What were you thinking, risking your life like that?" Emery had no answer. He bowed his head in silence. Julian sighed. "The healers said you overdid it. You need a rest tonight." "Right, thank you," Emery rasped. "You must be starving," Clea said, offering him a peeled orange fruit. She smiled gently as she fed him a piece. Emery managed a weak nod of thanks. Julian drifted to the window. His voice was low. "Sometimes I forget all this is real. The only reason I can think of is that Mars himself has favored us." "You mean Ares?" Thrax snapped without opening his eyes. "Romans can't help but steal and twist what isn't theirs." Julian ignored him and turned back to Emery. "So, how close are you to 30? Emery looked down at the mark on his palm. "I don't know. I thought I was close to breaking through, but it slipped away." Julian folded his arms, lost in thought. Clea leaned closer. "Come with me tomorrow. The guiding magus at the Institute of Water favors me. If I ask, she'll help. You might find what you need there." Julian cut in sharply. "No, he should stay with me at the Institute of Rock. He's close to grasping the basics. Starting over with you will only waste time." Clea didn't flinch, still feeding Emery another piece of fruit. "He'll gain more with me." "You've had him for 3 days already," Julian said with a shrug. "And he's still stuck. That's not progress." Chumo waved his hands, trying to speak without words, but no one seemed to notice. Clea's eyes locked on Emery's. "So, with me, right?" Julian's gaze hardened. "Or with me?" Emery hesitated. Then, quietly, "I'll go with Clea. Maybe it'll help if I try another element." Julian snorted. "Hoes before bros," he muttered, leaving the room without another glance. Clea clapped her hands in delight, scribbling notes on her palm. "Perfect. Tomorrow we'll start with." Emery's stomach nodded. Half the things she muttered made his spine tingle with unease. But his father's words echoed in his mind. A man's bond is his word. He couldn't back down now. Later, after the others left, Emery sat alone in the rain-dimmed room. His thoughts returned to the Institute of Rock. There, he had gained spirit power simply by touching the Origin Stone. If the Institute of Water held something similar, and the others as well, he might yet rise to 30. Water, plant, darkness. If he pushed through all of them, he might just make it. He clenched his fist. The decision was made. Tomorrow, he would follow Clea to the Institute of Water. Day 5, Water Institution, Verona. Stepping through the glowing portal, Emery found himself on the edge of paradise. Before him stretched an endless expanse of crystal blue sea, its waves shimmering under the light. The shoreline gleamed with pearly white sand, scattered with shells, while trees with azure leaves swayed gently in the breeze. Emery had never seen a place so breathtaking. Paradise was the only word for it. He walked alongside Clea, the grains of sand warm and ticklish beneath his feet. There weren't many here, perhaps 400 to 500 acolytes. Some bowed respectfully to Clea as she passed, and she returned each greeting with a graceful smile. Emery couldn't help noticing the stares, both jealous and curious, when others saw him walking beside the Academy's radiant goddess. Their group continued inland until the trees parted to reveal a vast lake. Towering trees ringed its edge, while a long stone platform stretched across the water toward a colossal statue rising from the center. Several acolytes dove from the platform into the lake. A woman in magus robes waited nearby, and Clea tugged Emery forward with a bright smile. "Sister Carla," Clea called, pulling Emery to her side. The blue-haired magus turned. Her expression was warm, her aura refreshing, yet the subtle weight of her presence pressed down on Emery. She was the guiding magus of Verona, equal in rank to Darius of the Stone Institute. "Clea, welcome back. Will you be joining today's training?" Carla asked. "In a bit. First, I want you to meet my friend, his first time here." Clea gestured to Emery. Carla studied him, eyes sharp, then smiled knowingly. Good choice, Clea." Clea clasped her hands together. "Then please help him, sister." Carla nodded. Raising a hand, she summoned beams of light that touched the foreheads of all newcomers. Special effect, able to breathe underwater for a certain time. "Thank you, Sister Carla." Clea beamed, grabbing Emery's hand once more. Together, they waded into the lake. Through the pristine water, Emery glimpsed something astonishing, a vast dome beneath the surface, glowing faintly. "Let's go," Clea whispered, tugging him down. They plunged in. The water was cool, but Emery could breathe easily thanks to the magus blessing. They swam toward the dome, passing through another shimmering portal before emerging inside. Emery gasped. The dome was like another world. Azure leaf trees and white flooring filled the space, while transparent glass walls revealed schools of rainbow, fish darting past, with the lake's floor stretching below. "Don't you think it's romantic?" Clea teased. Emery turned and nearly forgot to breathe. Clea's hair clung damply to her bronze skin, droplets rolling down her face. Her uniform pressed against her curves, accentuating her form. He swallowed hard, caught staring. Clea chuckled softly. "I'd love to stay, but I have to train elsewhere." "Good luck, Emery. I know you can do it." "Sister Carla, I'll leave him in your care." Carla nodded and ushered the newcomers deeper inside. Soon, Emery was seated cross-legged before a massive aquamarine stone that hovered in the air, radiating a soft glow. "You are on your 5th day," Carla said. "You know what to do. You have half a day begin." Emery closed his eyes. A voice whispered into his mind. Water is always flowing, never ending, adapting to its surroundings. Darkness enveloped him, and a river appeared, gentle at first, then rushing faster, turning wild. Memories surged, the river where he had once nearly drowned. Panic clawed at him. He reached for solid ground, for anything to hold. Again the voice came. Water is always flowing, never ending, adapting to its surroundings. Realization struck. This wasn't real, it was within his mind. Slowly, Emery released his fear. He let the current carry him, flowing with it instead of resisting. Up, down, left, right, swirling endlessly. He drifted, surrendering to the rhythm. And in that surrender, he felt something inside him shift. Then, Carla's voice pulled it back. "Time is up." A new glow pulsed on his palm. Spirit power +2. Current spirit power, 26.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually, I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Emery smiled, seeing the 2 points increase in his spirit power. It was the right choice to spend at least half a day in the Institute of Water's Origin Stone Room. Only 4 points left until he would reach target spirit power. Emery continued to practice the basic water element cultivation. He could feel there was only a thin layer left before he could gain a new understanding of the water elemental spirit. Without realizing it, several hours had passed and evening had arrived. Unfortunately, Emery still couldn't break through that layer. If he could just get one more day, he would most likely break through. He couldn't help but wonder, though, why they had such a limiting time studying in this Magus Academy. Emery got out of the room and went to enjoy the view of the lake's bottom with the fishes of all sizes swimming around. It didn't take long for the acolytes in a separate room to finish their training, and Clea came out with Magus Carla. Carla stood before Emery and checked his status through her wrist. Spirit power 26 and a quadruple element. You have quite the boy here, Clea. Spirit aptitude, though. It's too bad it's low. His eyebrows slightly twitched. Emery didn't like hearing as if he was already a failure. He clasped his hands before him and tried to be humble. Magus Carla, would it be fine if I stay here longer? I would like to practice more. Carla gave it a thought and said, as far as I'm aware, the rate of cultivation amongst all the elemental institutions is the same wherever you go. The same goes for the Origin Stone Room. And considering your spirit aptitude rank, you'd be lucky to achieve another point in spirit power even if you stayed here until your 7th day. Emery's shoulders slumped, but he straightened it immediately, determined to not give up. Clea took Magus Carla's hand and said, Sister Carla, give him some advice, please. Carla smiled at Clea and said, Let's see. Since I saw that you have 4 elements, which one have you tried so far? Emery answered, I cultivated in the Institution of Stone in my first 3 days. Carla furrowed her brows. Am I right to assume you've met Darius? Emery nodded. Carla sighed. You had such a stupid man taught you in the first crucial days. I'm sure he gave some exaggerated story about how Earth is the strongest amongst all the 10 elements. Well, it's not exactly over the top, but his barbaric measuring of the spirit energy through a strength test is just old-fashioned. Boy, did you know that even a single continuous droplet of water can deform a stone? Open your mind and hear this. The spirit of water is always flowing and relentless. The potential for strength is limitless. Listening to this Magus Carla's lecture, Emery's eyes widened in amazement. It was like he had an epiphany of the 10 elements and how they interact with each other. Carla crossed her arms. Let me ask you this first. What do you think of the water and earth elements? Emery placed a hand on his chin, thinking. He said, I think they're the opposite of each other. Earth focuses on keeping in place, as if it was a stubborn man, while water focuses on adapting to any situation. Carla clapped, her eyes beaming. Excellent. I'm glad that you've somehow reached an understanding of the 2 elements. Now listen to this. I happen to notice magi who have multiple elemental affinities exceed on the secondary elements. Having even a little understanding of the main elements would help the secondary elements by a large margin. And since you've studied earth and water, its secondary element is plant, Clea exclaimed. Carla smiled sweetly at Clea and said, Well done. She turned to Emery and continued, Studying in the Institution of Plant will give you a higher chance of possibly achieving Spirit Power 30, Rank 2 Acolyte, but whether you'll succeed or fail, it all falls on your determination. Emery's face shone. He bowed and said, Thank you, Magus Carla. Now that he thought about it, it made sense. Also, Emery studying the plant element might really be the way for him to go. After all, back home, he had always loved being around nature and exploring its nooks and crannies and strange plants and animals. Inside him, he couldn't help but blame his own stupidity for not realizing this sooner. Even though Emery didn't manage to get more than 2 spirit powers increase, it felt like he had increased in spirit. We appreciate your help so much, Sister Carla. Clea said. She turned to Emery and said, "Let's go." As Clea took Emery's arm, he suddenly slipped on the wet floor and dragged Clea down with him. Then something soft landed on Emery's hand. He had his eyes closed. He squished it once, then twice, wondering what that soft feeling was. A soft moan entered his ears. Next, a womanly scent wafted in his nose. Emery's eyes widened and crawled away. That soft feeling, could it be? It probably was. Clea's cheeks were red and her arms were covering her chest. Emery nervously laughed and slightly jumped as Clea stood up. He could still feel it on his palm. His face was turning hot. "I am sorry. I didn't mean to." Emery put out his palms. "It's okay, I don't mind." Clea's tone was low. This was the first time Emery had heard Clea like this. He prepared himself to be slapped and close his eyes, but that never happened. "Well, I guess it's better you than Tommy," she said and walked as if it didn't bother her that much. On the way to their private quarters, Clea seemed to have forgotten about it and talked like normal. As for Emery, though, he tried to keep his distance, but she kept sticking to him. There were only 2 days left before the examination of the new acolytes. Soon, they would return to their respective worlds. Today was the first time Emery unaccompanied, so a mixture of excitement and nervousness filled his stomach. After entering the portal, he arrived at a place filled with large, towering trees. Some roots were springing out from the ground. There was also a swamp behind him. The wind brushing against the leaves of the trees, birds flying around singing wonderful songs, tiny critters such as butterflies, rabbits, etc. moving around made Emery at ease. He let out a relaxed sigh and gazed at the colossal tree in the distance. It was so gigantic that Emery couldn't see its top. He felt like he was a single small leaf of this massive tree. In large, bold words, a signage said, "Welcome to the Elder's Respite." Emery headed toward the Institute of Plant along with hundreds of acolytes, and to his surprise, even the leaves of this magnificent tree were at least 10 times larger than the size of a human adult. He entered into the large hole at the feet of the tree, and the inside was filled with dozens of twisted staircases leading to different places. Luckily, though, in the middle was a person waiting behind desk. As he walked toward the reception area, he heard light, small steps walking toward him from behind, and when he turned around, a girl with long, white, silky hair wearing a light green dress and pale skin filled his vision. She wasn't wearing a veil this time, so her green, snake-like eyes felt like it was burning him because of her intense stare. Emery recognized her. She was the girl who had become his group's discussion during their first night in their private quarters. The girl who had the highest spirit and battle power. Silva was her name. The girl walked toward him with graceful steps, but seemed like she was on guard, ready to pounce at him if he made any sudden moves. Silva was now in front of him, but she was still silent. Emery's heart began beating faster. He said, "Hi, you're S. Silva, right?" "I'm Emery." Silva looked indifferent and suddenly leaned into him, sniffing. You smell different from the rest." Emery stepped back. He couldn't understand what she meant since he had taken a bath this morning. He nervously laughed. What do you mean?" "See, can I help you with anything?" Emery tried, keeping a straight face even though it wasn't successful. Deep inside him, he was beginning to become annoyed with himself on why he couldn't be relaxed and collected. Then the next words of the mysterious girl somehow broke his confidence. "You smell weak," Silva said, looking at him from top to bottom. He was silent. What the hell was that supposed to mean? After saying he was weak, she walked away and ascended on one of the twisted staircases. Emery watched her, and his feelings were becoming a turmoil of annoyance, dejection, and slight determination. He knew he was weak compared to the rest of the new acolytes, but did she, a stranger to him, really have to say that in front of his face? He brushed his hair before letting out another sigh. That helped a little, though, but the furrowed brows still lingered. Emery focused his mind on his objective in this place and proceeded to talk to the person manning the desk. After explaining he was a first-timer in this place, the person pointed to a wide, straight staircase where the origin stone of plant was located. He was able to get inside, and there were already dozens of acolytes training at that place today. They appeared more mature than him, though, and it seemed like was the only first-year acolyte in that room. This wasn't surprising since today was the 6th day of their 7 days studying in this Magus Academy. All the new acolytes had probably passed and were focusing on honing the elementals they had already established. Emery sat cross-legged and focused his thoughts on the mysterious piece of stone floating in the middle of vines. In plain view, there were no differences between the origin stones of earth, water, and plant, other than the color and aura they were emitting. He started to feel the same suffocating pressure of the other origin stones, and a sort of greenish liquid emerged from the ground in the darkness of his mind, creeping up to him. His whole body was now fully covered, and even if he couldn't move, the liquid's warm, refreshing made him feel comfortable. A word entered his mind. The plant is life. It grows, emerges, and breathes life to its surroundings. Emery felt like he was one with the liquid. Then the liquid started to squiggle, and he was divided into 2 whole separate parts, a splitting image of himself on the other side. He had his eyes closed, but he could tell the liquid getting bigger and bigger. It grows, emerges, and breathes life to its surroundings. Emery repeated, and the other image mirrored him. Slowly, the 2 halved itself once more, and now there were 4, from 4 into 8, and so on. Emery was losing himself within his 1,000 images. He should have been alarmed, but the wonderful sensation was overpowering him. Then he woke up. He was a single person again. "Time's up," the guarding Magus said. Emery shot up to his feet with a big smile on his face. He felt wonderful. He then exited the plant's origin stone room, but the surreal feeling stayed with him. The rest of the cultivation techniques he had tried with the other stones either made him panicked or distressed, but this time, the whole experience was different. He examined the symbol on his hand. Emery smiled, since he was 2 points shy from the issued target. The increase in power was as expected. He didn't waste time and sat cross-legged once more in front of the origin stones room, trying to see if he could master the basic plant spirit cultivation technique. Not long after he had sat, a group of acolytes came out from the room, bustling. It was quite puzzling to realize that they had only passed half a day of training at the Institute. Emery asked the female acolyte, who was checking her palm beside him, "Hi, sorry to bother you, but can you tell me what's going on?" She placed her attention on him and replied, "A mission has just been..." Emery followed the acolytes in the direction they had left and arrived in a large hall. Inside was a crowd of acolytes waiting on the man and woman talking to one another atop a platform. Emery moved closer to know more about what the mission was and couldn't help but notice the strong scent of herbs and plants floating in the air like the cauldron he had back in his late father's estate. The woman, dressed in a magus robe, had a dark skin with long curly hair and a face that had white stripes. She was talking to the man beside her on the platform, who had a small but wide stature, overgrown beard, reaching up to his stomach, and a rugged face full of wrinkles. She faced the crowd and announced, "Today we would like to announce a wonderful opportunity for every acolyte here. Master Grom from the Crafting Institute has issued a request for every acolyte that has an affinity with the plant element." The small, unusual-looking man stepped forward and took out a small bottle filled with green liquid from his summoning ring. He said, "Thank you for the introduction, Magus Erica. This here is a green essence potion. Once taken, it increases the spirit power of those who are acolytes rank 4 below." Emery's ears perked up and stared at the potion as he listened carefully to this person named Grom. Grom continued, "Making this potion requires a vital ingredient that appears only once a year, which is tonight. I am grateful that Magus Erica is helping us gather as much as we can to make the most of this potion. For each of you who will return with the plant we require, we'll give you a potion in return. We recommend that you all bring us as many as you can, because those who turn in the most number of the 4-leaf moon clover will become a disciple in our Crafting Institute, specifically the path of alchemy, an acceptance to an institution and an opportunity to increase the spirit power. This was what just Emery needed to stay in this Magus Academy. Grom put back the green essence potion. Now you all better get this opportunity, because becoming a disciple at the Crafting Institute is beneficial for magi that have the plant element affinity. We only have 100 or so members, but each one is vital and respected amongst the Magi. Don't waste this valuable opportunity." Emery wanted to raise his hand and join immediately. Tomorrow was the final day for the first-year acolytes. So if he had to, he would spend all night to find this four-leaf plant. However, he wasn't sure if it looked like the one from his world. His answer, though, was answered as Grom whipped out another object. Grom presented a four-leaf plant that had yellow shining spots on its four green leaves and green stalk. "This here is the plant we're asking you all to look for. Make sure to bring back the four-leaf moon clovers and not the three-leaf ones, since the three-leaf are worthless. This mission is exclusive to the Institute of Plant due to the property of this four-leaf moon clover. Only those who have the plant affinity will be able to make this glow, and the light is only visible at night. So once the dawn breaks, it'll be impossible for you to find this because they'll have transformed back to three-leaf unless you've picked them up from their stalks." Grom handed out a couple of four-leaf moon clovers for everyone to familiarize themselves with its appearance. Emery took a closer look at the plant and memorized its appearance before handing it back to the acolyte before him. When Grom received back the moon clovers, he clicked his tongue. In the crowd, suddenly, the clothing on the chest part of the acolyte before Emery lit up. Grom glared at the acolyte before saying, "Cheating already, aren't you? You're banned from attempting this mission." Knights entered the room and grabbed the first-year acolyte in front of Emery. The first-year acolyte tried to struggle while being escorted out of the room. He pleaded, No, I'm sorry. Please give me a chance." The door slammed shut after they had exited. Murmurings between the acolytes erupted, and Grom snorted. He said, "The Crafting Institute condemns all those who are dishonest, especially we, the members of the Path of Alchemy. I don't have to explain how disastrous it would be if a pretentious person manages to get in our ranks and provide false or incorrect items fell into the hands of our fellow Magi." Grom continued, "Be advised that the forest we are about to send you will have some beasts. They are lower-level beasts, mind you, hence no one of you should have a problem handling them. If you can't handle these beasts if you encounter one, though, might as well you give up being a magus." Grom touched his wrist, and a light shot up showing a map with 4X marks. "These 4 locations are where these four-leaf moon clovers are found. These are 2 to 3 hours away from where we are, so it's best you all start moving since it'll be sunset in a couple of hours." He then waved his hands, and trails of light flew to each of the acolytes' palms. Emery stared at his glowing palm and focused on it. A new option appeared, and he selected the word mission. Mission: gather four-leaf moon clovers. Time duration: until dawn. Reward: green essence potion. Additional reward if the required conditions are met. Acceptance to the Crafting Institute for the Path of Alchemy. An option for a map was also added, and Emery decided on which location he should go to. Racks of weapons and supplies then entered the room, and all the acolytes were given the items. Of course, Emery grabbed his weapon of choice. Emery exited the large hall and made his way west to the Elder's Respite. He took another look at the map through his palm before proceeding further. On the way, several acolytes had already passed him, but he had a smile on his face. His battle power sat on the 11 mark, so he could run and travel twice the distance, unlike before. The forest was becoming more and more dense as the orange ray of the setting sun passed through the small gaps between the leaves of the towering trees. Soon, he breathed in the damp air, jumped over large mossy roots, and the ground beneath his feet were starting to become muddy. Emery arrived at the swamp with many others, but started his search alone with the golden moon as his light. It was dark, and Emery rubbed his arm, trying to warm himself. In the distance, he noticed a ball of light hovering below a large glowing plant. He moved closer, readied his hand on the sword sheath on his waist, and a buzzing sound came from the ball of light. It apparently was a large flying insect the size of a bird. The symbol on Emery's palm glowed as new information entered his mind. Firefly, level 1 beast, battle power 10, not aggressive unless provoked. Emery furrowed his brows, a little conflicted. This insect had a battle power almost the same as him. He was about to draw his sword, but considering how fireflies usually gather around a light source in groups, he let go of his sword and took a different path. If he could avoid fighting for now, he would. Time to start looking for that plant, he said to himself. Emery began searching for the four-leaf moon clover at the foot of trees, bushes, near vines, sometimes near glowing plants where there were no fireflies gathering. 2 hours of walking around had already passed, but not a single moon clover he had found were 4 leaves. They were all 3 leaves. He kept on looking, though, under the light of the golden moon. Just one would be enough to complete his quest and possibly break through the spirit power requirement. His nose was turning red, and the cold air was slowly seeping to his bones. If ever he couldn't find one, he would try training at the Institute of Darkness Origin Stone Institute tomorrow. But based on what he had heard from Chumo regarding how difficult it was to cultivate the darkness element, Emery kept on brushing plants aside in hopes of finding a 4-leaf moon clover. Soon, Emery saw a bunch of yellow dotted plants across the distance from where he stood. He wasn't sure whether they were 4 leaves, but when he stepped closer, his forward feet sank in the mud, ankles high. Emery pulled back his heavy feet and focused his eyes. It was faint, but he could see he was about to walk into murky waters, making him unsure whether to proceed. However, risk came with rewards. He steeled himself after considering his situation and placed the same foot again. A man's voice from behind suddenly, making Emery startled. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Emery turned around, and a young, chubby acolyte was standing not far from him. "What are you?" The swamp beneath his feet bubbled. "Hurry, get out now," shouted the boy. Emery's heart did a somersault while yanking his feet hard, making him unbalanced as he fell to his bottom. He clumsily pulled out his sword, on guard, as the bubble popped, and out came a frog the size of a dog. "Ha ha, you're a bit jumpy, aren't you?" The chubby acolyte had a big grin while holding his stomach, laughing out hard. Emery tightened his grip on the sword. He had been made fun of by another stranger on the same day. He tried to get back to his feet, not saying a word, while staring at the brown frog that was several times bigger than the frog in Britain, which simply gazed back at him like a fool. Just when Emery felt his ear pounding from anger, the muddy water of the swamp rippled before a large splash erupted, and a beast as big as a crocodile jumped out, devouring the frog. Drake, Level 2 Beast. Battle Power 20. Aggressive beast, but doesn't attack human unless provoked. The Drake gave him a glance before diving back into the swamp. Emery's face no longer had a trace of anger, rather it was replaced with shock. "Here, let me help you," the acolyte said, offering a hand to help Emery up his feet. "Are you a first year like me? Call me Fatty. What about you? What's your name?" Now that Emery had a good look at the guy, the acolyte's short hair stuck to his big round head. His eyes were small and slanted, looking a bit like a fat Chumo. "Emery," he answered, sheathing back his sword. "Nice to meet you." "Emery," Fatty said while nodding. He added, "I advise not wandering alone in this swamp. It's dangerous for us first years." Emery narrowed his eyes and said, "Aren't you a first year yourself?" Fatty showed his pearly white teeth. "Well, I didn't say I was alone, did I?" Behind Fatty, silhouettes of people moved closer to where they were standing. Emery noticed they were wearing a slightly different uniform from the one he and Fatty were wearing. They must be second or third year acolytes that Fatty tagged along with. One of the senior acolytes walked past them and kneeled, touching the ground. A green glow lit up from the senior acolyte's palm, then the surrounding roots creeped toward the direction Emery had been wanting to go to. The roots formed a bridge, and the senior acolyte walked on top of it. Emery, Fatty, and the rest followed suit and crossed the bridge. As soon as they arrived at the area where the pile of spotted plants was, the first senior Emery watched as the senior acolyte plucked 4-leaf moon clover from its stalk without much concern. After searching for about half an hour, it was the only one they had found in this pile of yellow spotted plants. He couldn't but help notice how the senior acolyte simply watched look around, as if some kind of guard. They walked back the bridge made of wood when the senior acolyte in front stopped. Emery readied his stance when he had heard the acolyte said entangled. The calm, murky water became turbulent, and a drake from beneath them shot up, tied with roots. The senior acolyte touched the ring on his finger, and a spear flashed from thin air before stabbing the drake, right to where its heart should be. He waved off the blood before swiping his ring again, making the drake and spear disappear at the same time. Emery wanted to come over and ask the senior acolyte about his ring and spell. However, the acolyte had some kind of aura that made you feel he wasn't an easy person to talk to. Still, this was the first time Emery had seen an acolyte or magus in action. He dreamed of a day when he'd be able to use such spells and items, but first things first, he had to find a 4-leaf moon clover. After crossing the bridge, the senior acolyte turned to Emery and said, "You kid, what's your name?" "It's Emery," he said, his eyes slightly twitched. "Okay, mine's Cole, kid. Would like to join us?" Cole asked with his arms crossed. Emery bit his lips before sighing. He hated being called like a kid. Moreover, this acolyte named Cole didn't seem to be that older than him. Maybe around 1 to 2 years gap only. Anyway, he tried to place his emotions back in his head and focused on the mission's objective instead. He asked, "What's the catch?" "I'll lead and watch your backs while you guys search and give all the plants to me," Cole said nonchalantly. "Hey, then doesn't that defeat the purpose of why we're here in the first place?" Emery said, brows furrowed. "I need to get as many 4-leaf moon clovers as I can to secure my acceptance in the ranks of alchemists. I don't care about the potion, since they're useless to me." Master Grom said for each acolyte exchanging a 4-leaf moon clover, he would give only 1 potion, so I'll give 1 moon clover to each person part of the group. "Another catch is that you'll have to stay with the group until we get back," Cole explained. Emery thought for a moment and turned to Fatty. "Did you all agree to this?" Fatty nodded. "I'm not interested in alchemy, but I can't pass up the opportunity to increase my spirit power. So, have you made up your mind?" Cole asked. Emery thought this wasn't as bad as he had initially thought. At the very least, this would solve his own issue. He, too, was interested in joining the alchemists. However, after spending a couple of hours searching for the plant, he wasn't confident he'd be able to gather enough, especially if there were other groups like this also searching. Emery considered that making more friends like them would be beneficial for his future. No one would be able to do everything all alone, after all. "Okay, I'll join you guys," Emery said. "Good." Fatty, introduce the others to him, Cole said, walking away. Fatty gave Emery a rundown of the other 2 people Emery hadn't talked to yet. The first one had a large, muscled body and was named Topper. Fatty mentioned how he had seen Topper lift a drake with just 1 hand. He thought Topper was not a human at first, but fortunately he was. Fatty couldn't tell if Topper had another element aside from plants since Topper had been using brute strength to deal with most things. The second person he introduced was a female named Mags. She had a small frame and pinkish hair. Her elemental affinity was both fire and plant. Fatty mentioned Cole had asked her first because it would be difficult to stay the night in a moist, damp swamp. Lastly, Fatty presented himself having an earth and plant elemental affinity. He was a rank 2 acolyte, while Topper and Mags were rank 3 and Cole was rank 5. Wandering around the swamp, they eventually found a flat ground at the foot of an aged tree. Cole stopped and turned to face them and said, "Let's eat." "All right, it's dinner time," Fatty exclaimed. They still hadn't found another moon clover, but when Cole mentioned eating, Emery's stomach rumbled. He took a seat at one of the large roots and opened the supply bag he received in Elder's Respite. Emery whipped out a bread-like food that fell hard like a rock to the touch. Fatty said, "Hey, brother, please put that away. It gives me shivers whenever I remember eating that. It tastes like an old tree bark. Let's wait for Mags to cook the drake meat." Mags finished roasting the drake meat, and the moment it touched Emery's tongue, the rich flavor of warm meat, complemented with the charred, smoked portions, made Emery salivate further as he devoured it right up to its bones. After everyone had had their fill, Emery decided to strike up some conversation, wherein he found out that Cole was a second-year acolyte. He had gone through the same quest last year, but failed to gain entry into the Alchemist Institute. When they had finished resting, they got up and began searching under the guidance of the Golden Moon. Emery and the rest searched every nook and crannies where the little rare plants might be hiding. Wandering in a place filled with wondrous, glowing, small, large, various colors of plants made Emery feel like he was back home. 2 hours had passed, and they had found 3 more 4-leaf moon clovers. It wasn't Emery that had found them, but when he walked among the bushes near a glowing vine that had a bluish glow, he saw a similar plant. 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves. Emery tried to pick the plant, but the moment he tugged it, it didn't budge. He pulled harder, and the soil trembled. Then the vines nearby started moving, and from the ground, a plant sprang out that was as tall as 3 meters, 9.8 feet. Angler vine, level 3 beast, battle power 30. The angler vine erupted from the ground and stared at the dangling, upside-down Emery with its inverted bluish eyes. Emery grabbed tight, with his left hand, the fake moon clover as he caught the falling sword from his waist with his other hand. He tried to stab its menacing blue eyes, but missed, hitting the monster's forehead instead. The monster then swayed back and forth, struggling in pain, making Emery land on its back. Emery held on with both hands of the sword and positioned himself facing the fuller of the sword to make sure he wouldn't meet his own demise. Damn boy, I don't know if you're lucky or unlucky. It's rarer to find level 3 beast in this forest than the plant, Topper said, pulling out the large axe on his back before starting to hack wildly at the monster's feet. Roots, vines, branches flew everywhere every time Topper's axe slashed, but as soon as he pulled the axe out, vines crept to where he had hit, reinforcing the damaged part that was already as hard as a metal. Nevertheless, Topper kept on swinging his axe like a crazed lumberjack. Mags, on the other hand, had her fireball ready at the top of her palm. She was looking for an opportunity to burn this monster down, but Emery kept on holding tight on his sword, despite the violent swinging of the angler vine. "Jump now," Fatty exclaimed. Emery dazedly looked toward the direction of Fatty and noticed a faint green light behind him. He didn't know what it was, but it gave him an ominous feeling. He used the force of the angler vine's swing and threw himself toward the body of a nearby tree and braced himself. As soon as he hit the tree and fell on the ground, his sight became blurred as he watched as the green light shot toward where it had been hanging on. The angler vine managed to narrowly dodge the green light, but one of its shoulders got hit instead and dropped to the ground. Mags threw the fireball, burning its other shoulder. It uttered a high-pitched screech, which made all cover their ears and close their eyes. At that moment, Emery heard the rustling of the bushes beside him. Then a woman wearing light greenish uniform, pale skin, and long white hair appeared as if she had come straight from a fairy tale scroll he had read back in his father's estate. His pupils dilated at the sight of her. "Oh, it's you again," Sylvis said. Her snake-like eyes stared at him with coldness. Emery tried to get up, but his body sent shocks of pain. He watched Silva got on one knee, her palm glowing green. "Entangled," Sylvis said. Several larger roots and branches than the one Cole had made appeared and wrapped around the burning angler vine. The angler vine thrashed violently and managed to send Topper flying with a kick. Silva, however, walked forward and made a fist. Her entangle spell started clenching stronger around the 3 meters, 9.8 feet, angler vine. Crunching sound reverberated in their area, and the angler vine gave its last roar until it finally was crushed to a pulp. Plant matter flew everywhere along with a bluish-green liquid that splattered on the ground. Everyone was dumbfounded on how she had easily killed the level 3 beast, angler vine. She approached its corpse, touched the ring on her finger, and made the angler vine disappear before turning around. "You? How are you?" Cole saw her eyes and his face darkened. "No wonder. You're a half-breed." Silva ignored him and simply walked away from the group. "Get back here, you beast, and return what you stole." Cole snapped while lifting his spear. Silva appeared indifferent and simply stood there. She stared at Cole with her sharp eyes and said, "I killed the rare beast, therefore the spoils should go to the killer. So why should I?" She turned away, but Topper, Mags, and Fatty blocked her way. "And what's the meaning of this?" Silva said coolly. "Isn't it obvious? Filthy half-breed," Cole said with his teeth clenched, making his spear light up with green glow. Silva's glare even turned colder to the point where Emery, who had just stood up, could feel her bloodlust, sending electricity up his spine. Cole then thrust his spear, sending a green bolt of light toward the large tree behind Silva, purposely scratching her cheek. The next one won't miss, so hand over the damned magical beast, you disgusting snake. 4 against 1. Aren't you too much of a man, needing backup, to fight against a single girl? Silva said, her lips had half a smile, looking at Cole. Shut up, half-breed. You're not a human, you're not even a girl. We don't acknowledge all of you. Therefore, you're our enemy, Cole said, pointing his spear at her neck. This line of reasoning, it was absurd. Emery was starting to feel the pounding in his ear, hard against his chest. Memories of that night resurged in his mind. The raid. The Marauders' racial hate for the Croton. Everyone, can't we all just calm down? Emery said. Actually, he was saying that to himself the most. Apparently, these dim-witted purists think we're an abomination, Silva said, staring at him. But what about you? Which side will you fight with? Them or your own? Emery's brows twitched. What was this girl talking about? Them or your own? Did she perhaps mean because she was from the same class as him? Cole clicked his tongue and spoke while turning his head. What did she mean by that? Cole didn't get to finish his sentence. However, when Silva suddenly whipped out a sword from her ring and slashed, Cole bent his head, barely dodging Silva's sudden attack. He moved with swiftness, but Silva was no less slow than him. Topper, Mags, and Fatty tried to join the fray and had her surrounded. Cole, however, snapped at the 3. I'll take her on by myself. He made the roots beneath Silva creep up, but Silva's palm glowed and the creeping roots stopped. She dashed to Cole and thrust with such killing intent that even Emery could also feel a chill up his spine every time she attacked. Still, Cole managed to dodge every single one of them. The 2 were on equal skill in terms of using the sword and the spear. No one had an advantage over the other. Cole used another spell and made spikes out of the vines from the ground. Vine spike. Silva jumped out of the way, dodging every protruding sharp spikes. She readied her stance and waited for Cole to make his next move. Cole, on the other hand, got out of his stance as he squinted his eyes and stared at her uniform. You're a first year, aren't you? So what if I am? Silva replied, her eyes keeping track of Cole, Topper, Mags, Fatty, and Emery's positions. I want to ask again. You know you can't win against me. Now hand over the beast corpse, or I'll turn you into a snake wine, Cole said, his voice rough. Silva slightly stepped back as Cole moved closer in front of her, Topper and Mags on the side, while Fatty behind her. She still had her guard up and said, Okay, I'm willing to trade it for you. Give me 2 4-leaf moon clovers in return. Bitch, I don't think you understand your situation. Leave it there and you'll get to keep your life, Cole said, making his spear glow with green light. 1 plant in exchange for my service of killing it. That's my final offer. Sounds like an equal trade, yes? Silva said, her tone as cold as ice. The other 4 looked at each other. They seemed to be considering the offer Silva made. Emery, however, had a different hunch. He noticed her grip on the sword tightened and her foot shifted at an odd angle. He asked himself what he would do if he got surrounded and realized what was about to happen. Emery picked up his sword from the ground and searched his bag for whatever thing he could get a hold of. It was at that moment, though, that his prediction came to life. Silva slammed the earth, and spikes also sprang from the ground where the 4 were standing. As the 4 people jumped back, she shot forward toward Emery. Emery knew he was the weakest link, and to get out of an encirclement, targeting the vulnerable spot was the most sensible thing to do. He was ready, though, and fished out the bread-like food he hadn't eaten, which was as hard as a stone, and threw it at Silva. Silva easily deflected it. However, he wasn't done. Emery charged forward to meet her sword, and the instant the sword sparked from the clash, he knew he wouldn't be able to match her strength, so he let it go at the last moment. Then tackled the surprised Silva down. Emery snatched her wrists, placed all his weight on her, and buried his face on her chest. He shouted, voice muffled, hurry. She thrashed around, but Emery kept pushing her. He couldn't see it, but her face was turning red as she said, get off me. Why, you pervert? Entangle. Cole issued his spell, and the roots tightly wrapped around the two. Hey, what are you doing? Emery questioned Cole as he felt the roots circling his skin along with Silva. Shut it. Stop talking. Silva made every effort she could, but the roots had finally tied the two of them. She was unable to cast her spell in such conditions. Emery moved his head, trying to get out of Silva's chest, and traveled above. His and her face were only an inch away from each other. Silva turned her head away, but Emery could still feel the slight heat radiating off from her cheeks and breath. Cole ignored Emery's remarks and pointed a spear to Silva just above Emery's head. She didn't respond, so Cole moved the spear close to her forehead. Can you please just give the guy what he wants so we can get out of this situation? Emery said. Silva clicked her tongue before having the angler vine's corpse appear. Cole then used his ring to store the dead beast. He added, now hand over your moon clovers as well. I don't have any on me, Silva said. So, you still dare lie to my face, you bitch's snake, Cole said as he grabbed her hand that had her ring. Let me go, or I will. Cole slapped her before she even finished her words. You will what? What can you do right now? Cole said with a dark grin, loosening the roots near Silva's hand. He then pointed the spear to her index finger and added, I'm going to give you a choice. Either you relinquish your ownership of the ring, or I'll cut you pretty little fingers one by one like the snake you are. Wait, aren't you going a little too far? Emery said. He could feel Silva's body shaking and her heart beating against his chest. Silva hissed, Try me, you purist. I'll have you hang for this. Is that so? Then so be it. Cole raised his spear and thrust down. Emery tried to shake themselves, but the roots were too big that they were unable to dodge fast enough. The spear grazed right next to his neck. It missed, but somehow Emery and Silva was able to roll on the ground. Ha! Of course I'm not serious. I'm not stupid enough to be punished by the Academy for such a lowly half-breed, Cole said, pulling back his spear. Asshole, let me go now. Silva shouted at the top of her lungs whilst trying to break away from the roots that tied them. Emery was now at the bottom, while Silva was on top. Their eyes met when Emery noticed a lightning flashed in the clear night sky, lit by the golden moon. A loud boom soon followed, then a domineering voice resounded in their minds, giving chills to all acolytes in the swamp. The night sky became as bright as day momentarily before turning dark again. Again, it was only the moon shining alone above before a deafening boom filled their minds. Everyone became dazed for a moment, including Emery. When he opened his eyes, he could hear a buzzing sound in his ears, lingering. What just happened? Screamed Fatty, backing himself toward a tree. Cole could also be seen trembling. His voice was shaking as he said, as something bad. That was either a powerful spell or a powerful being. But how? What should we do? Mags asked, holding her staff close toward her chest. Whatever that was, we need to get away here as far as possible. Let's return to the Institute, Cole said, gripping his spear tightly. Let me go. Silva screamed as she struggled to break free from the large roots. Stop fooling around, guys. Let us. Emery didn't get to finish his words when another boom entered their minds. This time, he lost consciousness for a second while Cole, Topper, Mags, and Fatty fell to their knees. They tried to stand up, but their knees were quavering. The first time shocked them, but the second one scared everyone to their core. Fatty was the first to get up straight and ran deep into the woods, leaving the 5 acolytes. Cole was the second to stand up. He glanced at Emery. Their eyes met for a second, before turning away with Mags and Topper in tow. Hey guys, seriously, Emery called out to them, but no one was left, not even their shadows. It was only him and this girl with the snake eyes. He bit his lips, and for a moment, he thought of himself as the unluckiest person in the world. Shouldn't have joined them, he thought. He should have just gone with his original plan, since getting involved with other people always seemed to mess his life. HMPF, those are wonderful friends you have, commented Silva. They're not my friends. Emery snapped as he wiggled hard to the point where his entangled, exposed skin was starting to burn from the tight roots. His body was brushing up against Silva when she said, Stop wiggling, pervert. Emery stopped. He had forgotten how he should be honorable in front of such a lady. He cleared his throat before looking at her and said, "I am sorry, my lady. Do you have any other plans?" Silva simply stayed silent, but the bushes rustled in response to Emery's questioning. Emery tried to see who it was and saw Topper coming out of the bushes. However, Emery's eyes widened when Topper raised his axe. "Hey, hey, hey!" Emery cried out when Topper swung it down. He closed his eyes, but the thing he feared didn't come to pass. Instead, he felt the roots hooked onto something, so when he looked again, the back edge of the axe locked on one of the roots, and Topper pulled. The roots slightly loosened, and after Topper did the same thing for the second time, Sylvie used her physical prowess and broke free from the entanglement. She quickly got up, went for the sword on the ground near her, and pointed it at Emery's neck, who had just stood up. Her eyes were as cold as ice. Emery broke out a cold sweat as he raised his hands and said, "I am sorry, Silva. You know that wasn't on purpose. I think we should be more concerned about that scary sound and get out of here." Silva gritted her teeth before lowering the sword. Just when Emery let out a sigh of relief, the edge of his vision noticed a flash of a hand and was once again on the ground. His cheek now had a red mark of a palm as it stung in pain from Silva's slap. Emery rubbed his burning cheek and said, "Haha, I think I deserve that." He then looked at Topper and added, "Thank you for coming back." "Really?" Topper nodded without saying a word and turned to the direction where the Institute of Plants should be. Emery and Silva went with Topper, not wanting to waste one more second in the forest. They didn't know where the sound came from, but it was best to stay in Elder's Respite where there were tons of acolytes and magi were staying. The three of them sped through the forest, but after a few hundred meters of running, another boom rang in their heads, making them stumble. "Do any one of you have an idea?" Not able to finish his sentence, a speeding object flew past them and crashed into one of the aged trees. They all paused for a moment, looked at each other, and decided to take a detour still in the general direction of the Elder's Respite. They hadn't gotten far yet when they heard a scream filled with terror. Emery thought the voice was familiar, so he ran to where the sound came from. When he had arrived, however, regret quickly churned in his stomach. In front of him was a huge beast, thrice the size of a bear from Earth. It was chomping on the lower half of what appeared to be the silhouette of a chubby boy. The cloud had blocked the moon's light, but when its ray was finally clear once more to shine on the land, it slowly showed Fatty's horrified, disfigured face. Not far from him, Emery heard a cough, and when he looked over, he saw a woman dressed in a magus robe holding her bleeding stomach. Her dark skin almost blended with the tree. She was leaning, but Emery could clearly see the white stripe on her face. It was Magus Erica, the one who announced the mission of gathering four-leaf moon clovers from Master Grom. Emery placed one foot back, but the crunching sound of a branch behind him rang out. The hulking beast's bloodshot eyes then suddenly shifted straight to him. It stared at Emery as it munched the broken bones of Fatty along with blood dripping from its mouth. A chill ran from the bottom of his spine up to his nape. Emery's whole body froze. The beating of his heart was now reaching behind his ear. Seeing that monster stare at him as it chewed Fatty made his breathing become tight. It was just that horrifying for Emery to see the giant monster that only appeared in stories his family scholar told him to be actually real in this world. Even more so when he saw their institute's Magus was powerless bleeding on the side. This world and its creatures were outlandish beyond his imagination. He hadn't noticed it, but when he had somehow gotten a clearer view, all he had initially seen so far was its dragon-shaped head. The hulking monster had two large horns protruding from its head and spikes, starting from the top of its head up to its back. Its two wings were retracted at the moment, as it simply enjoyed its meal. On its head, there was a figure of a man with long, golden hair, wearing bulky scarlet armor. The red dragon didn't mind the man as it continued chomping on the last bit of Fatty, which was the arm peeking out of its mouth. When Emery's eyes met the man's, he could feel a tremendous pressure that was making him look down. The man's presence was so overwhelming that a simple glance from him made Emery want to throw himself on the ground. Emery tried to resist the urge, even though he felt like an ant facing a god of death, and continued watching as the man raised a hand toward Emery's direction, and Magus Erica suddenly flew as if the air had pulled her. Emery could hear his deep, cold voice, filled with intent to kill, and said, "Pretentious human, die." The man in red armor grabbed Magus Erica by the throat. Her legs were kicking in the air as she struggled to break free from the man's clasp. Emery watched helplessly. He wanted to run away from here as far as possible, but his feet were stuck to the ground, even his arms and head. He couldn't move. His eyes were glued to Magus Erica's weakening struggle when suddenly a lightning from the sky struck the man's arm, and a thunderous boom soon followed. A halo of light opened on top of Emery, and several figures wearing Magus robes burst out, including a fireball hitting the dragon's head. The fireball exploded on the dragon's head, making it fall down and issued a powerful shockwave that threw Emery back to a tree. Topper and Silva had actually followed him not far behind, and were also caught in the wind and sent back. Emery's head was buzzing once again and coughed out blood. He dazedly got up, his vision, and barely made out the figure of a large thing that was no less smaller than the dragon fighting. The thing pounded the dragon's head downward, issuing another blast. The ground beneath Emery's shook as if an earthquake had occurred, making him lose his balance once more. The initial shockwave had thrown him and Silva and Topper not far, but even though there was still a gap between them and the Magi fighting against the man and the dragon, the succeeding explosions from the battle reverberated inside his whole being. This was terrifying, but this was also the first time Emery had experienced the pinnacle of a Magus power. It was an eye-opening experience. After Emery's vision had cleared, he saw the thing fighting that smacked the dragon down was a giant version of the stone monster he had seen in the Institute of Stone. At that moment, he heard a familiar friendly voice. "You guys get away from this place immediately and run," Darius said to Emery, Silva, and Topper, who were still half shocked. "Get going." Emery hadn't had the time to reply when Darius' palm glowed yellow as the nearby rocks darted to his body, making an armor made of sparkling stone. After covering his whole body from head to toe, he jetted over to the hovering man wearing red armor, still clasping Magus Erica while fighting the other Magi, and enlarged his fist with the rocks from the forest before punching the man. Emery, Silva, and Topper turned back and ran toward the general direction of Elder's Respite, but when Emery took another look, the man in red armor knocked Darius and destroyed sparkling stone armor. He noticed, though, that the man was no longer holding Magus Erica, but still fending off the other Magi. His eyes then fell to the dragon. The dragon had the stone monster beneath its feet, and when Emery and the dragon's bloodshot eyes met, it opened its jaw and light was converging inside. A sharp sound was ringing out as the light was turning brighter and redder. Emery's instinct then went haywire as he could feel his life was knocking at death's door. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Jump!" The dragon's wings opened before flapping back as a blazing ray of flames gushed from the dragon's mouth toward Emery, Silva, and Topper's direction. Emery jumped, pushing Silva on his side as the dragon's breath hurled just behind them. It barely missed them, but the searing heat from the flame prickled Emery's skin. 2 seconds hadn't even passed yet, but Emery was sweating everywhere. Smoke rose to the sky, and when he got back to his feet, Emery searched for Topper. He found him, however. What he saw once again shocked him to his core. Topper hadn't jumped in time and got caught in the blast. His lower half had melted like a pile of goo, bones sticking out. The smell of burnt meat filled the air as his face was becoming charred. Topper was still somewhat alive and had his hand reaching out to Emery. Emery stared at Topper with wide eyes opened. 5 seconds had just passed, but within that time, all that Emery could see of Topper was the white eyes and mouth that was making the words, "Help me." He unconsciously moved forward, wanted to help the Topper who had helped free him and Silva earlier, but Silva grabbed his arm. She said, "It's too late for him. Don't be stupid." Emery's mind was blank. Silva took it upon herself and didn't let go of Emery's arm as she dragged him away. The look on Topper's face kept on running in Emery's mind as they ran deeper into the forest, leaving the battlefield that kept on issuing thundering blasts behind. Deeper and deeper into the forest Emery and Silva ran. The rays of the golden moon barely peeked through the small gaps of the dense forest. Emery barely kept up with Silva, and when another boom that shook the earth, Emery tripped, falling on the ground with a loud thud. Silva turned around and tried to pick up Emery. She said hastily, "Do you want to die? Get up." Emery's mind was blank. He couldn't think properly even though he could hear a woman's muffled voice asking him to stand up. After having his face hit the ground, though, slowly things were becoming clearer. First, the images of the Magi fighting against a pair of a hulking monster and a man in red armor. After that, Fatty and Topper. Emery's chest tightened as a burning liquid rose to his throat, making him vomit. His ears now finally registered the things happening around him. He wiped his moist eyes as he tried to at least sit up. Then he noticed the sound of explosions, ground still trembling, and the occasional flashes of lights echoing in the sky behind them, letting them know that they were still far from the word safe. Emery shook his head at Silva while he tried to catch his breath. Every bit of his body, arms, chest, back, legs, feet, were all issuing a sting that made him feel hot, as if there was a volcano ready to erupt inside him. He gritted his teeth, his heart pumping blood as hard as it could to all parts of his body, which felt like it was about to explode. He forced himself calm, looking at Silva, and said, "Run, run without me. There is no reason for you to wait for me." Silva appeared shocked at Emery. Speechless, she was before sighing. "You really are hopeless." She faced away from Emery, took one step before going back to him, and checked his pulse. Emery sweated profusely and tried to pull back his arm, but she wouldn't let go. "What are you doing?" As she checked, her brows furrowed. Silva said, "Stop struggling. You shouldn't fight it. Embrace it and let go." It was now Emery's turn to make a frown. Whatever she said didn't make sense to him. Embrace that he was feeling hot all up to his bones. Embrace the stinging pain and let it go. Emery opened his mouth to ask, but another familiar voice rang out, and he looked over. "What are you doing?" Emery forgot what he was about to ask and forced his body to stand up with his wobbly legs. He rushed toward the direction of the voice, not minding the pain traveling throughout his whole body with each step he took. She followed him, however, before sighing and taking out her sword. "We really shouldn't waste time with this. If you're feeling fine, then let's just keep running from this place. You don't have to follow me if you don't want to. I'm not forcing you to come with me. I can go alone," Emery said before clenching his jaws. "Why do you care about others when you can't even help yourself?" "There's no benefit with being a busybody," Silva said with a tint of disdain in her voice. Emery kept his mouth shut and focused on his objective. He started to run, and after 100 steps or so, he finally saw Mags and Cole cornering a bloodied man fire sitting on the ground. That man had his clothes ripped with blood stains on whatever was left of his shirt. His hair was disheveled, looking like someone who had just stepped off a battlefield, the same as what Emery had seen from the man in red armor. This man on the ground had a distinguishing characteristic that clearly told he wasn't a human like them. Apart from the pale skin, free of freckles and unique gleaming eyes, this man's pointed ears were almost twice the size of a human's. "Cole, what's happening here?" Emery said, his voice's tone low. Cole had a spear on top of the bloodied man's neck, while Mag stood behind the man with her staff readied. He turned to see Emery, but didn't even try to explain himself. "Dispel your magic, Mags. This elf is dying. We should report him to the higher-ups and let the one in charge decide on what to do with him," Mag said, making her staff glow brighter. "By killing it, we can get the contents of its ring. Now stand down and let me finish this filthy thing," Cole said, greed apparent in his eyes. "Elf," Emery said unwittingly. "You don't even know what an elf is?" "You're worse than I thought," exclaimed Silva before placing her sword in front of her. "Elves are humanity's mortal enemies. This is one of the reasons why the Academy was founded." Emery finally understood why Cole was acting like this over the bloodied elf. However, Emery wouldn't forget what Cole had done to him and Silva. Still, that didn't stop Emery from warning them of what they had just experienced. "Much as I hate you for leaving me and Silva to die, We shouldn't waste time and get out of here. Fatty and Topper have been killed by a man who looks like him, so I'm sure he is linked to whatever is happening now. Cole's lips curled downwards. His face got darker as he pulled back his spear, seemingly ready to strike with more force. You heard him, Mags? I'll kill this wretched thing. The injured elf suddenly coughed blood and hunched over. He opened his eyes and said, "Little human kids, you all should leave before they come for me." Cole shouted and thrusted his spear toward the elf's skull, but a simple wave of the elf's hand warded off Cole's spear to the side. "Too slow, kid," the elf said before suddenly vanishing and appearing behind Cole. He touched Cole's shoulder and said with a knowing look, "But your physique is not half bad and there's an ounce of talent. I guess you're acceptable." After saying that, a light flashed not far from them. It looked like the same teleportation portal, but the figure that came out was different from what they had thought. Behind the darkness of the portal, several creatures revealed themselves as they walked out. Half a dozen green-skinned creatures twice the size of an adult human came out with their heavy armors, machetes, maces, and axes. Their green eyes landed toward the bloodied elf, and they started to bare their large, protruding fangs. Mags and Silva took a step back while Emery glanced at the information showing on his palm. "Orcs. Battle power 50. Orcs," exclaimed Mags as she turned around and ran. However, after taking 2 steps, blood spilled as she was thrown and stuck to a tree with a spear on her back. "KRR. Nobody leaves," an orc said with his rough and raspy voice. Then another humanoid creature stepped out from the portal. It had long golden braided hair, pointy ears, and a dark cloak. 2 more elves came out after the first. One had short dark hair, while the other a brown short hair, and they emitted the same pressure as the elf wearing red armor. Emery shakingly tried to keep his head straight at them before looking at his palm. However, unlike the orcs, Emery's palm only showed they were elves, but the battle power? When Emery's eyes fell once more at Elf in the forward position, the elf glanced back, and Emery could feel his whole being held by an invisible force keeping him in place. Not even a slight twitch of his legs or fingers could be done, and he could hear Silva was also struggling the same as him. "Ugh, your misfortune is rubbing on me. This is all your fault," Silva said with her gritted teeth. Emery couldn't say anything. He hadn't expected that whatever the invisible pressure these elves were emitting would also affect his ability of speech. He racked his brain, thinking what could he even do. Not again. He couldn't watch and do nothing. He moved around his eyes, searching for anything or something that could give them at least a chance to escape. The elves made their way in front of the bloodied elf with the orcs behind them. Cian Ariel, Elvish language. "Can't you leave me alone for old time's sake?" the elf said. His eyes seemed to have a gloomy light. "You know it's not possible," the cloaked elf with the golden braided hair said, shaking his head. The elf sighed. "Then I have no other choice." Wind converged around them, and their surroundings became darker for a moment. The invisible pressure holding back Emery and Silva was lifted off as they were pushed back several steps. A black wisp exited from the injured elf's chest and pushed in Cole's chest before the elf dropped to the ground with his eyes wide open. Cole fell to his knees and started screaming at the top of his lungs. After the tail of the wisp made its way in his chest, an enormous energy exploded from him, and several black orbs of dark energy circled around him. The orbs began to spin before expanding in size and shot toward the orcs. "GRA!" One of the orcs grunted as he jumped to the side. However, the black orbs followed the orcs, and they tried to deflect it with their weapons. It didn't prove effective, and when one of the orbs touched one of the orc shook slightly before falling lifelessly on the ground. Only a few seconds had passed, but 3 orcs were dead. The 3 cloaked elves, however, stood still, unfazed. They were chanting something underneath their breaths as the orbs flew toward them. The cloaked elf in front raised his hand, creating a mirror-like liquid substance that halted the black orbs in its path. The black orbs shook violently, but no matter how hard it tried, it couldn't escape the liquid substance. Another elf summoned a staff from his ring and a bolt of lightning shot to Cole. More bolts of lightning darted at Cole, but he repelled all of them with a simple wave of hand. The lightning struck the nearby trees, knocking some of them down, and some succeeded in lighting up a whole tree on fire. And orcs charged Cole with their weapons held high, but with a simple gesture, the lightning bolts were swayed and incinerated the orcs instead. The smell of charred rotten meat wafted in the air as Emery watched and believed that this Cole was different from the Cole they had known. Seeing an opportunity, the third one disappeared from sight before reappearing behind Cole. Cole was half expecting it and managed to jump out of the third elf's two knives. However, the elf dispersed like smoke and revealed himself once again behind Cole, managing to cut off Cole's two legs. Cole plummeted on the ground, and the elf sat on top of him before plunging the knives in his shoulders. He screamed as the orb spun stronger and flew toward his direction, but lightning strikes erupted again from the staff of the second cloaked elf, deflecting the orbs. The elf sitting on Cole withdrew his knives before stabbing again, making Cole lose consciousness. When the energy emitting from Cole pressure was starting to diminish, Emery managed to take one step forward. However, the elf, who seemed to be the leader, struck another gaze at him and Silva, disabling them from moving once more. "Take him," the first cloaked elf said to an orc that just walked out of the portal, his voice seemingly unconcerned. The orc grabbed Cole by the uniform and dragged him back to the portal, leaving a line on the ground. Meanwhile, the other two elves approached their leader. "That is more effortless than I thought," the elf with the staff said. "We are fortunate he's been fighting with Aegis for days, and we managed to catch him. Had just moved to another body," the elf with the knives said, sheathing his daggers before pointing at the dead elf. "What about this one?" The first cloaked elf moved closer. Emery couldn't help but notice the darkness in his eyes and heavy tone as he said, "It's now an empty vessel. Just leave him here." He turned around and said in almost like a whisper, "Nah, Mariel." "What about them?" asked the elf with knives pointing at Emery's. "We have no use for them. Kill them." Emery looked around searching for anything that could give at least a chance to run or survive for a bit longer. The energy spike from Cole and the battle here should have attracted something or someone like how they had first experienced the arrival of the elf in red armor. If no one came, then they'd sure end up like that dead elf, whose eyes right now were like white balls. "Emery, if you have any life-saving items, it's now the time to use it," Silva shouted as she summoned a triangle pendant with a round purple gem in the middle. Emery could only laugh inwardly. He was just a lowly noble from a lowly family in a lowly world. Never mind life-saving items. He didn't have any useful objects at all. The elf with the staff didn't say much and waved his staff, shooting a line of lightning in their direction. Silva lifted the triangular pendant. It lit up as she said, "Ye my queen dowager, grant me your protection." The necklace floated in the air and released a wave of energy that made a spherical shield with them two inside, deflecting the lightning bolt toward a nearby tree. After she had done so, Silva coughed blood but kept on chanting with gritted teeth the same mantra over and over, keeping them safe from the continuous lightning bolts. "This kid, so troublesome." The attacking elf clicked his tongue and prepared another bigger lightning strike that made the air surrounding them crackling, which also made Emery and Silva's hairs on the back of their necks stand up with a tingling sensation. Just then, the dark sky lit by a minuscule amount of moonlight flashed as bright as day momentarily as the earth trembled as if a giant had walked on land. The cloaked elf with the knife said, "Stop playing around, Ezekiel. If that human magus appears, it'll ruin our chances of escaping. Let's go." "Fine, Talaro," Ezekiel said with his staff's light diminishing. Soon, the tingling in the air subsided and he, along with the other two elves, entered the portal and vanished with Cole, whose two legs were cut. The major threats had disappeared into the void of the portal. However, Emery and Silva weren't out of danger yet. Two orcs had stayed behind with a demonic grin on their awful faces, probably thinking of how to chop their two little prey into pieces while caressing their axes and spears. Granted that with the departure of the elves, whose strength were unimaginable, had made their survival chance increased by a huge margin, these orcs were also not a walk in the park. Emery and Silva had seen the battle power of these orcs earlier, and these orcs still eclipsed them. Emery glanced at Mags, still hanging from the tree, unconscious. She seemed to have lost a lot of blood based on the pool that had accumulated beneath her. Silva also didn't stop coughing out blood, and soon stopped her chanting. The purple necklace cracked, and then shattered into dust. Ugh, it's definitely not my day today. I just used my most precious treasure and almost all of my strength. Silva braced herself and picked up her sword from the ground. I would have run if I wasn't more injured. Why are you still here? I won't leave you in Mags, Emery said, picking up Cole's spear. Silva shrugged. HMPF, at least you're not a coward. There might be some hope for you. Her eyes kept on switching between the two nearing orcs. Their battle power is 50. We will barely have a chance if we work together. Mine's 30. 11, Emery said, not even a hint of hesitation. He then saw her turn around with her eyes wide open and mouth agape. Silva said in a high note, What? Oh my goodness. I changed my mind. You're not brave, only an idiot. We're both gonna die. The two orcs dashed toward them. Entangled, Silva said, and the roots nearby didn't waste time and wrapped around the two charging orcs. It was able to stop them from charging momentarily. The two orcs with their bulging muscles ripped the roots from their bodies. It, however, was enough to give Silva a precious few seconds to drink a bottle of something she had summoned from a ring before throwing the remaining half to Emery. Drink it now. Emery caught the bottle. Its strong medicinal scent almost made his stomach turn upside down, but he pinched his nose and drank it anyway. He tasted the overwhelming bitterness the liquid had, but that got taken out of his mind as all his veins responded with a stinging pain. He rolled on the ground, screaming in pain as his blood boiled. Barely, he saw Silva's appearance changing into having green scales on her otherwise pale white skin. Then his hearing became incredibly clear as the sound of what appeared to be a nearby river entered his mind. His sense of smell picked up the scent of the earth and blood that was dripping underneath Mag's body. A furious wind blew past them, and the golden moonlight's rays shone directly on Emery. He managed to crouch, gasping for air. The hairs on his body, as well as his skin, were becoming thicker and thicker. The searing pain in his body was rising, and he felt hot all over, as if he was being burned alive. His fingernails were growing at a visible rate until its sharpness clutched the soil itself. Bloodline activated. The words bloodline activated came into Emery's view after the symbol on his palm shone. Feelings of rage and destruction slowly filled his mind. Fury, kill, destroy those threats against his life overwhelmed his thoughts while staring at those two orcs, who were almost finished tearing apart the roots entangling them. He barely wanted to do the same at those orcs. Rip them apart from limb to limb. Barely left with some sliver of consciousness in him. His palm glowed once more and showed the following. Battle power has increased by 25 points. Emery Ambrose. Fey Bloodline activated. Temporary. Battle power 36. Spirit power 28. Fortunately, his consciousness was returning to him as he forced his feeling of rage to calm down. He tried to read over his status once more with a clearer mind, but the orcs had already broken free and charged him and Silva with their weapons held high. The orc with an axe ran straight to him. And in his vision, it felt like the orc's movement was a bit slower than what he had witnessed earlier. He then ordered his body to take one step and stab the orc with Cole's spear, but to his surprise, he underestimated his speed and dashed through the orc, crashing to a tree instead. Stop fooling around. Our lives are at stake here, shouted Silva, whose voice sounded crisp clear despite the deafening shouting and grunting of the orcs, dueling the other orc with a spear. The orc with the axe appeared dumbfounded, seeing its prey able to pass through him. It turned around and gave chase once more. Emery's wolf-like ears twitched for a moment as he got up. He clearly hadn't expected crashing against the tree. He needed to get accustomed to his newfound strength first. Once again, Emery dashed forward, and after he had somewhat gotten used to his speed, he charged the orc, narrowly missing its axe, before stabbing it to the gut. What he had was speed exceeding this orc. However, the orc's dense, heavy armor had more than enough sturdiness and thickness to put a stop at the inch-deep thrust Emery had executed, making the spear's vanguard stuck in between in its rock-hard abs and armor. The orc grinned widely with its large fangs while holding the spear with its overly large hand. Emery's instinct alarmed him of an impending danger and jumped, letting go the spear and dodging the solid punch the orc had released. He withdrew the sword on his waist and slashed down, targeting the orc's head, but hitting the orc's shoulder instead after it managed to sway its head in the narrowest of margins. Still, the slice cut deeper than the spear had done his black. Warm blood splashed across Emery's face. It was his turn to grin widely. Adrenaline coursed through his veins wildly at the thought of injuring this seemingly invincible orc, but his smile disappeared as fast as it appeared because the orc had already pulled back its fist and issued another side punch at the airborne Emery, who couldn't do anything other than slightly twisting his body in the opposite direction of the punch. A loud bam resounded, and Emery crashed once again into another large, old, oaken tree, which remained intact despite the powerful force that had thrown him. Emery coughed out blood and tried to move his trembling, weakened legs while watching the crazed orc running toward him. He spared a glance at Silva, who, on the other hand, had more success in fighting against the orc she was facing, evident by the blood dripping from the countless number of slashes on the orc's armor and face. She still, however, wasn't in the best condition. He could hear very well how she was gasping for air and see how paler she seemed despite being covered with green scales up to her face. Emery turned his attention back to his orc, who once again felt like an insurmountable giant in his mind. When he tried to get up, Emery felt a smooth rock on the ground. An idea then popped in his mind. It was an old story passed from generations to generations of how a little boy had managed to defeat a man whom others had feared as an undefeatable warrior. He grabbed the stone tightly in his hairy, claw-like fist, took a deep breath before throwing it with all his might. The stone cut into the air like a powerful slingshot and hit right in the center of the orc's forehead. It didn't pass through the head, but it was enough for the orc to drop onto the ground. Still, Emery could also hear how it was still breathing, grunting, and alive. Silva had seemed to have noticed how Emery had made the orc fall as she issued a powerful slash that pushed back the orc before jumping and landing not far from Emery. Emery was now regaining back his strength in his legs and took a closer look at the Silva beside him. Her hands and face were filled with green scales, and the slit in her eyes appeared more like that of a genuine snake unlike before. "What is it we just drank?" Emery asked. "Isn't it obvious?" "It SSS Bloodline Booster Potion." Silva answered. "So, I do have a bloodline?" Emery asked, tilting his head. "Of course. Didn't you hear me saying I can smell it? But what's weak?" Emery's eyes then fell on Silva's sword, and even though it had blood all over it, he saw his reflection before exclaiming, "What the? How come I look like that?" His face still looked a boyish human, but he had a sharp fong, furry face with furry ears. Greenish, curly lines also appeared on his face and body. "Never mind that. Let SSS finish this now, else the potion SSS effect would disappear in a minute. Do you have any spells at all? I remember you having multiple element affinity." Emery's blank face answered the question by itself as he tried to feel the furry ears on top of his head. "Oh my goodness," she screamed. "If we survive this, you owe me big time." Her shout drowned out the thoughts of him looking like a pup. Her voice sounded louder, even more so with his enhanced hearing. Emery said after releasing his hands on his ears, "That orc on the ground, he's still alive. We should focus on him first while he's still dazed." Silva nodded. "Okay, this ISS the last time I can use a spell. Don't waste it. Entangle." Instantly, a crowd of thick roots wrapped against the orc holding a spear and restrained its movements. Emery and Silva lunged at the orc lying on the ground in two directions. Silva was still faster than him and arrived first. She was about to strike down when Emery heard a whistling spear slicing the air. The other orc had managed to throw its spear and sent it flying towards Silva. Emery caught the spear in the midst of transit and hurled it back, targeting the entangled orc. He immediately looked back at Silva. However, the orc on the ground had already regained consciousness and had grasped Silva on the neck with its burly hand. He grabbed his sword tighter and used the momentum of his speed to cut one of the orc's legs, a bit concerned that if he targeted the head, he would slash Silva instead. He succeeded in cutting one of the legs off, but that wasn't enough to make the orc release its death grip on Silva. Instead, the orc tightened its clasp on Silva as it tried to stand on one knee. Emery saw Silva's face turning purple, and at that moment, he knew he shouldn't hesitate anymore. The smell of blood awakened his instincts further as he decided to let the underlying desire he had been wanting to unleash since he had first felt his body become unsettled. Once again, he used his speed to jump between the trees to gain more momentum, and finally, blood splashed across Emery and Silva's faces. The orc's head slipped from its neck, and Emery had an air of wildness with his wide, grim grin. It was his first kill, and surprisingly, he felt nothing but satisfaction. The orc's grip was released, and Silva fell on the ground, coughing hard. Emery was in euphoria, looking up at the flying orc's head. That moment of elation, however, made him forget of the remaining threat. The other orc had actually caught the spear as well and ripped the roots, entangling it while Emery was picking up speed. It managed to sneak up behind them and found this an opportune moment to kill the human who had given it a hard time. Emery, still in his elated state, looked back at Silva and pulled himself back together just as the orc jumped. "Watch out!" Silva turned her head, saw the orc, and rolled out of the way while Emery lunged in. Emery managed to stab his sword into the orc's body. However, blood spilled also from his chest. The orc's spear pierced through Emery's body. Silva was raised from a planet far away called Ouroboros. One could infer how disastrous the planet's past was by looking at the large crater visible from space, surrounded by bountiful forests, expansive swamps, and huge bodies of water. More than 30,000 years ago, after the crater had formed, the authorities in the matters of the galaxy regarded this planet as a higher-class world. The planet's history was filled with strife and civil wars between its previous billions of inhabitants. The wars between those who had the blood of the serpent and those who didn't continued warring for more than 10 millennia that had sunk entire landscapes of this once intercontinental planet. It only ended when the race of the serpent had finally struck a decisive blow against the head of the human purist faction that wished for the demise of all half-breed humans. Alas, the 1% minority of the cunning serpent's race had won the unending war. 1,000 years of peace followed the remaining populace, and they had regarded the serpent's race as the new ruler of the planet Ouroboros. In this lasting peace of the millennia, every year, the galaxy's Magus Academy handpicked a single talented young person to be trained for the higher war happening inside the known galaxy. When the time of the selection occurred, Silva was the exceptional young talent selected amongst her million peers training with the elements like her. So, she couldn't help but always think how fortunate and blessed she was to be chosen. She was determined not to waste this opportunity. In the first year of her training in this most prestigious academy, however, she was facing the most dangerous event that had happened in her 15 years of existence. She cursed her luck when she had decided to follow a boy who had the smell of a weak bloodline coursing through his veins. One event led to the other, and after she had thought they were going to escape with their lives after encountering a legendary beast and a high-leveled elf magus, things just kept getting worse and worse. Silva opened the potion her clan leader had given her, who had instructed to only consume it in a life or death scenario in not more than half portion. Bloodline power growing. Battle power has increased by 18 points. She had also already used the life-saving artifact her parents had given her as a send-away gift, but even after using these gifts, she still wasn't strong enough to fight the foot soldiers of the Magus elves, the orcs. Losing consciousness, she tried to break free from the burly hand of the hulking orc clutching her neck. But then, when her mind was about to go blank, its grip loosened because its head was cut off by the stupid young man, who was the sole cause of her increasing misfortune. She coughed hard and tried to inhale at the same time. About to give that stupid brat a rare praise for at least being useful, she heard him scream, "Watch out." Silva turned her head and saw an orc jump from behind a tree shadow with its spear directed straight at her. She rolled away, hoping to get out of the spear's aim, but the sound of flesh being pierced entered her ears. She looked at the direction of the sound, and there, the stupid brat, whom she had been cursing, was standing just above her with his chest pierced by the metal tip of the spear that stopped just a few inches away from her head. "Emery!" she shouted, her eyes wide open at the sight of him. She stared at him, mouth agape, the boy looking back at her with a cheeky smile. "I'm glad it didn't hit you," he said before he did something that made an impression on her. The boy turned crazy and screams like a wild animal, breaking the spear in half, pulling it out of his body like it's nothing, and thrusting it into one of the orc's eyes. The orc and the stupid boy both fell on the ground. Silva had to make sure this orc was dead through and through, so she mustered her strength Ross up, walked over, and chopped down the orc's head with her bloodied sword. At the same time, the potion's effect ended. Serpentine's bloodline lowered, returning to normal. With the death of the two orcs, the danger to their lives had finally passed. She had fallen back down once again and gazed at the dense leaves covering the starry night sky. Silva said underneath her breath with a slight hint of joy, "We survived, Emery. We're alive." But the stupid boy didn't respond. She turned her head sideways to see if he was still breathing. She tiredly got up again, felt his pulse, and noticed how it was weakening with every beat. Her own heart then sped up, staring at the boy who had just risked his life to save her. For the first time in her life, someone had looked after her, someone outside of her family, her clan members. It was a bizarre experience out of the culture she had been raised with. Then she remembered how much she hated people with idiotic beliefs like Emery. Why should I care about this selfish, stupid boy? Silva shouted to herself as she ran with all the strength her legs could still muster. Not toward the direction of the Institute, rather where she and Emery had tried to escape from. The battlefield where several magi were fighting against the legendary dragon and its master, the elf in red armor. She ran in a hope that the battle would have ended. She ran and ran, not stopping even for a moment to catch her breath, hoping to find a magi in the area who could heal the stupid boy. Meanwhile, after Silva had left, a black wisp drifted out of the old elf's corpse who had died. It seemed to hover for a moment, as if it was checking its surroundings before entering through the hole in Emery's chest. It felt like forever since Emery had experienced the warm embrace of the rising sun. There was nothing more than he wanted right now than to lay in his soft, fragrant bed, but he still had things he needed to accomplish. Today was the last day he would be staying in this magical place, and in order to be able to return here and keep his memories of this place, he first must break through the required spirit power and receive admission in one of this academy's institutions. He opened the bag that belonged to Cole and found 11 pieces of 4-leaf moon clovers, which he needed to submit to the Plants Institute and receive the green essence potion. When he looked up, Silva had her hand stretched out, palm wide open. "Time for you to pay me for my services," Silva said, making it sound like a matter of fact. Emery closed the bag and kept it close to him. "This isn't ours. So you really are a selfish brat. You're planning to keep it all for yourself, aren't you?" Silva accused. "What? No, I would have never thought that. This rightfully belongs to Cole, Topper, Fatty, and Mags." Emery defended himself. Silva had a look like she just couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you being serious right now? Gosh, you're even more stupid than a cow. Why do you even care about those two who left us to die? Especially that arrogant bastard. Even if he's alive, I guarantee you these plants are the last thing in his mind. Having said that, until dawn is what they have given us. Corpses and that dying chick won't make it before the submission ends. So, tell me, how are you not being stupid?" Every word Silva said made perfect sense to him, but he remained doubtful. Silva shook her head and sighed. "It's no use arguing with such a buffoon. How about this? First, you submit the plant and share the reward with him later." She pinched her nose. "Please, tell me you can at least do that." Emery gave it a thought and said, "Sounds reasonable enough." She then swiftly grabbed the bag from Emery's hand. "Hey, what are you doing? Relax. I'm only taking what's rightfully mine as compensation for those who had left me to die," Silva explained before throwing the bag back to Emery. Emery caught the bag and counted 9 4-leaf moon clovers left. She had taken one in exchange for her killing the angler vine and the second for leaving them, he guessed. It didn't still sit right with him, but he convinced himself. All right, now that I've been compensated, it's time for me to go, Silva said, turning back and walking away. See you around, Silva, Emery said, bidding her goodbye. Why would I want to see you again, stupid? Silva exclaimed as her walk suddenly turned into a jog and disappeared into one of the floating islands. Emery went back to his quarters first and washed himself. After changing his uniform, he tried not to spare a glance at the tempting bed, fearing he might fall asleep immediately and waste the remaining time he had. He noticed his clothes seemed to be a bit tighter and chest and biceps buffed up. He switched his mind off of that and checked his palm instead, only to look baffled. Emery Ambrose. Battle Power 15. Spirit Power 28. Emery rubbed his burning eyes and confirmed his battle power had indeed increased by 4 points. The only reason he could think of was probably the side effects of the bloodline potion he drank. He dispelled his status and went out of his room, feeling a bit better with the good news. As soon as he walked out, he was surprised to see Clea, Julian, Thrax, and Shumo had already gotten up and were preparing to eat on the table in their living area. You look like a mess. What happened? Clea commented. Indeed, he was. Even though he had taken a bath, he had seen the dark circles beneath his eyes while changing in front of the mirror in his room. He gave half a smile, took a seat, drinking a hot beverage that somehow revitalized him, and spent a couple of minutes retelling what he had experienced, not including how he had almost died, of course, about an attack, and how several acolytes died in a battle between humans and elves. Clea and Julian added up the information they had heard during their 6 days training. Now that they had heard what happened last night from Emery, they arrived at the conclusion that they still didn't know a lot about this world and what this higher war was about. They discussed a few more things and agreed to always share if they get other information that could tell them more about this world, since their world didn't have any of this knowledge. They also decided to find ways how they could get in touch once they returned to their planet and how this could be relayed in the future. What are your plans for today? Clea asked. Emery had considered today's agenda earlier. He had 2 options on what he should do for today. The first option was that, according to his first plan, he would head to the Dark Institution to gain half a day's access from the Origin Stone of Darkness, while the other was to submit the 4-leaf moon clovers like Silva had suggested. Emery thought about it carefully. He couldn't just choose one and resign for the day. After all, he had to work on both. Emery decided it'd be best to spend half a day at the Institute of Darkness just to get some time meditating in front of the Origin Stone. After that, he only hoped that he was still not too late to exchange the rare plants to Mastergrom for a green essence potion. Emery glanced at Shumo. I'll go with Shumo at the Institution of Darkness. Emery and Shumo went to the plaza and entered the portal heading toward the Institution of Darkness. Emery kept yawning on the way, and when they were finally in front of the Magus guarding the room, the gate was tightly locked. The Magus guarding the room said, "The Origin Stone room cannot be used at this time." The Institute of Darkness was situated on top of a hill, like some sort of majestic palace sitting on a cliff. It had multiple entrances beneath it, wherein Emery and Shumo took the crowdest one. After passing through the cave-like passages, they arrived at a place that was dark, damp, and lit with torches like a dungeon instead of a palace. They then entered another cave passage. The steps changed from gray-dark stone into marbled floors, took many left and right turns, which Emery failed all to remember, before finally seeing a large, ominous black gate where the Origin of Darkness seemed to be stored. Shumo led Emery to a Magus talking to another acolyte. Shumo exclaimed, "Magus Zian!" The Magus had a dark cloak with a hood that almost covered up to his nose. Zian spoke with a rough and raspy voice. "Shumo, I see that you're eager to train, and you've brought friend." "Yes, Magus Zian. His name is Emery. He also has a dark affinity, and it's his first time here," explained Shumo after he had made a fist and a palm before his chest. "I see." Zian turned his attention to Emery and said, "And I assume you are wanting to cultivate for half a day in the Darkness Origin Stone Room." Emery copied Shumo's palm and fist and nodded. He said, "Yes, Magus Zian." Zian glanced at the Origin Stone Room before shaking his head. "I'm afraid you can't. The Origin Stone Room is not available." Why not? Emery asked. It is being used, and no one is allowed to enter, Zian replied. After going through so many misfortunes since yesterday, Emery still couldn't catch a break. He had hoped things would be back to normal now that a new day had arrived, but apparently not. Expectations against reality always bit him in the back. Emery put his hands together, determined to enter this place, since if didn't he wasn't entirely sure he would pass the required spirit power after he had taken the potion from Master Grom. Please, Magus, this is probably my last chance to pass the academy requirement. Magus Zian checked Emery's status and commented, Aptitude B, no wonder. Zian observed Emery from head to toe and finally sighed. It would have been no issue giving you access to it since all first-year acolytes have the privilege to enter it. However, Grand Magus Zenoya is using the room right now. But Magus Zian, no amount of pleading will work. Chamo. Zian then sounded a bit gentler this time. Like I have mentioned, we can't let anyone enter the room right now, but your friend's privilege to cultivate still stands in the future. Emery's heart thought that if he couldn't break through to second-level acolyte today, then what was the use of that future empty promise? He wouldn't return here by that time. His shoulders slumped, placed one hand on Chumo's back, and gave a weak nod. Emery bowed after Chumo had stood straight and said, We understand, Magus Zian. Emery, I understand your needs, but... Zian stopped talking and beckoned Emery to come closer. I see. I feel some odd connection with you now that I got to take a closer look at you. I wonder what it is. Emery was also confused as Zian. Zian said, Emery, there's something about you that wants me to help except my hands are tight. If you manage to pass, find me next year and I will surely compensate for what you have missed today. Thank you, Magus, Emery and Chumo said at the same time. He left the institute after being guided by Chumo through the maze-like cave passages. Now, he only hoped the green essence potion would be more than enough to make him break through to second-level acolyte, and he still needed to find an institute that would accept him. Emery found the portal heading to Elder's Respite open once more and confirmed from the night nearby it was safe again to enter. He entered the portal along with the crowd and arrived back at the hall where Master Grom was indeed still waiting and accepting submissions for the 4-leaf moon clovers. The dwarf caressed his long, overgrown beard as he said to one of the acolytes just handing over their rare plants. I know the west location had encountered some undesirables last night, but really? Just one plant for the 4 of you. The acolyte, who seemed to be the leader of the 4, looked like he had taken a bitter pill before walking away without saying a word. Whispering comments then about this dwarf traveled amongst the first-year acolytes, saying how he seemed to be underestimating the danger of last night's event. After all, the Magus that had introduced him was nowhere to be found. Magus Erica had been severely injured and was now recovering in some place Emery didn't know. Master Grom could hear the acolytes' murmurings about him, but he'd no mind into it. He knew last night's incident forced most of the acolytes to leave the location too early. As for those who didn't, it was a shame to hear what had happened to them. He also felt regretful that this moon clover only grew on that night once a year. Hence, he couldn't help his disappointment. He called out to the remaining crowd. No other. Emery immediately rushed forward and passed over Cole's bag filled with the clovers. Let me see how many you got. Master Grom then counted 1, 2, 3. His eyes glowed and said, Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. Here, 9 potions for you as a reward. Now, if there's no one else, I'll take my leave and start work. Emery hadn't participated in this gathering from the start, so he didn't know how many moon clovers the others had exchanged it with. But seeing the master's reaction, it seemed that he didn't win this challenge. At least, Emery was quite satisfied with the 9 tiny bottles in his 2 hands. He planned to drink a bottle or 2 and keep the rest for Mags, and probably Cole since he had joined them in the last few hours or so. As soon as he turned around, however, the look on the faces of the other acolytes appeared restless. He couldn't but wonder why they looked like that when a woman he knew came rushing forward. Wait, Master Grom. Grom turned around and Silva said, Master, you forgot to announce the winner of this challenge. The crowd was whispering, saying all kinds of negative things about how this dwarf was trying to downsize last night's threat against their lives. When the bunch of little potions were passed on at Emery's hands, he hadn't expected he would get 9 of them. He could remember Master Grom saying, "We'll give you a potion in return for each of you who will return with the plant we require." Emery had assumed they'd only get 1 per acolyte, but did this dwarf change his rules at the last minute to at least make them feel better? Emery turned around and saw how the others appeared confused. He wanted to know why they looked like that when Master Grom decided to walk away. Silva then appeared from the masses and stopped the dwarf. "Master Grom, please wait. You didn't announce the winner of this challenge," Silva exclaimed. Grom stopped on his tracks and seemed a bit embarrassed. "Oh dear me, that totally slipped my mind. I appreciate you reminding me, dear." Silva turned to Emery and said, Where were you?" "I had a prior plan this morning, so I had to do that first," Emery replied. Silva muttered something under her breath, but Emery didn't hear a word she had just said. "Anyway, the most a student had submitted was 5, while I exchanged 2. Not even a total of 20 moon clovers have been found, so your submission of 9 makes up half of the rest." Emery was astounded. "What?" Silva nodded, looking proud, and said, "Yes, you are supposed to be the winner." Master Grom faced the crowd and looked thoughtful. "I, indeed, had promised that whoever exchanged the most number of moon clovers shall have a spot within our ranks. However, with the amount I have just received, this is the least I have collected in a century. Therefore, I am unable to accept any apprentice this time." The acolytes nearby grumbled. Emery could vaguely hear the words they used to describe the dwarf: nasty, hypocrite, opportunist, etc. Grom still paid no attention to it, and turned away once more, but when he was about to leave, he almost bumped into a woman whom Emery recognized. "Magus Minerva," said Emery. Minerva returned him a glance before bending forward, face almost touching with the dwarf's, and began to play with his beard. She said, "Master Grom, you're not thinking of going back on your word for my student now, are you?" Master Grom seemed to puff smoke from his ears. He tittered as he said, "Ahem, is he really your student, Magus Minerva?" She nodded in response and said, "Of course, Master Grom. In fact, he almost died trying to find those plants. Surely Master Grom is not that cruel, right?" Minerva stroked the dwarf's beard again, and a big smile filled his face. "Ahem, all right. Boy, you come with me now." Magus Minerva winked at Emery before leaving herself. Emery was a little surprised by what he had just witnessed, but he knew that this was the best opportunity for him and should not be missed. Emery immediately followed where Master Grom had gone and finally caught up to him. "Boy, what's your name?" Master Grom asked, his voice sounding indifferent. "Emery, Master Grom," replied Emery as he walked behind the dwarf. "Emery, is it? What's your connection with Magus and Minerva?" Master Grom said. Emery paused for a moment. He thought he had heard Master Grom sounding a bit excited for a moment before placing it on the back of his mind. He answered, She's my class instructor." Master Grom looked thoughtful for a moment and said, "Then why did she take special attention to you, boy? Who are you actually?" Emery had no idea how to answer the dwarf. It never had occurred in his mind he was special or what. Seeing how he had hesitated to answer, Master Grom's voice suddenly raised with his nostrils seemingly flaring. "Whatever it is, remember, always talk good things about me to her, okay?" "Okay." Emery was taken aback and responded without thinking, Yes. Master Grom." Master Grom tried to regain his composure with a cough and then said, "Excellent, boy." They then took the return portal from the Elder's Respite to the plaza and then to another portal. As soon as Emery stepped out, he was visibly shocked once more to see the location they had just arrived at. The place was full of tall, straight structures with transparent windows on its surface, flying boats, moving carriages on the ground without being drawn by any animals, sprawling crowds, and straight roads that had trees on the side. This place was certainly much bigger compared to the combat institution. "Welcome to Golden City, boy," Master Grom exclaimed. Emery, still wide-eyed, looked over for as far as the eye could see. The whole place was filled with bustling people and buildings. "Come on now, we don't have all day, do we?" Master Grom urged as he walked ahead of Emery, who was still gawking at such an unbelievable place. They walked for a good 5 minutes or so when Master Grom stopped in his tracks and invited Emery inside another towering building that had flying objects inside like giant boats with wings made of wood or iron entering and exiting. After going inside, Emery couldn't help but notice the large grayish-black staircase with yellow lines on the side that seemed to move on its own leading upstairs. Master Grom called out to him with an irritated voice. "What are you doing, boy?" "This way." They entered a small room that seemed to only fit 4 to 6 people. Master Grom pressed a button on the side, and the door hissed closed. Emery wanted to voice out his thoughts. Why were they inside such a cramped space when the room trembled, and Emery experienced a tingling, weird sensation in his head, making him dazedly look in front of him. There he saw through the slits of the door. They seemed to be moving upward since the light outside descended. The door hissed open this time, and Master Grom exited the small room with Emery following closely. Emery glanced back at the door, and it closed on its own without any other person in the room. Not long after they walked out, Master Grom led Emery to a place where there were a lot of the same flying boats. They stopped in front of a wooden boat bird. Master Grom looked at him and said, "Oh boy, don't tell me you come from a lower world, do you?" That's what they say." Master Grom let out a big sigh and said, "You'll have a tough time ahead of you then, boy. It seems your beautiful instructor isn't doing you a favor and has wanted to make me suffer at the same time." The dwarf entered the boat bird object and beckoned Emery to sit on the back. Emery hesitated for a moment before steeling himself and trusting this small, old man with an overgrown beard. As soon as Emery had taken a comfortable position and strapped on the safety leash Master Grom had asked him to wear, the boat bird began to shake and then sped off over the city, and the wave of fresh air rushed into Emery's face, making him feel unsure whether to focus on the refreshing air or the gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach at the thought they were hovering 100 feet off the ground with nothing solid below them except for the cold, hard ground. It was a world of imagination that never existed in his mind. It didn't take long for them to arrive at their destination, and the boat bird to go inside a much larger building than the one they had come from. Master Grom looked back at him with a wide grin and said, "We have arrived at the Apothecary Institute." Author announcement. Dear Earth's greatest Magus readers, first, let me introduce myself. I am a father of 2 young daughters, and I own and run my own small business. With these in mind, I must tell you that I do not have as much time to write as unlike other full-time authors. Nevertheless, I love to create stories. If you check my profile, you will see that I have also written another book for more than a year. So, I could confidently say that I do not abandon a story. This book won first place in the WPC event, and winning it meant the novel received a contracted deal. Like all the other contracted novels, this novel must go to premium. I hope you're all enjoying this novel so far and are trusting me as the author to do my best to give the best experience in the world of Magi. Wishing for your continuous support. Sincerely, Avens. Updated note, after 300 chapters, COVID situation slowly lead me to write full-time. So you will see more update stability and better content. To be warned before continue and asked the most by readers. 1. No harem. There are many female characters, but I enjoy romance first. So even if there will be more than one love interest, it will be deep. 2. It's a slow burn, as slow as the whole volume 1, maybe will be depressing to read. The MC is still a little boy, and he do many mistakes. But if you could pass the second volume, you will see how this story could reach web novel top 15 trending with just 300 chapters. If these MC are not to your like, but you are invested to the world, I would recommend my other novel, which is in the same universe, just different time and place in the elf world. Blood, Elf Monarch. Smart, questionable moral MC. Fast-moving. Upskill from start and harem. The gnawing feeling on his stomach didn't last long, as he found the sights around him were worth it. Soon, they arrived at a much towering building where there were also lots of flying boats entering and exiting. They landed on one of the balconies, and when they got off the boat bird, Emery followed Master Grom and was greeted by another acolyte wearing a slightly different uniform that had an emblem of a triangular container on the chest. "Welcome back, Master Grom," the acolyte said, slightly bowing. Just like Master Grom, the acolyte faintly smelled of herbs and earth. Master Grom nodded in response and said, "Cedric, this is the new recruit. His name is..." Just ask him his name and give him the standard orientation into the Institute. The dwarf then turned to face Emery and added, "Boy, you don't need to be the best student or anything. Just make sure not to embarrass me, okay? And remember what I told you earlier, understood?" Emery chuckled in his mind, seeing how the dwarf had turned slightly red again. He kept his face innocent and said, "Yes, Master Grom." The dwarf cleared his throat again. Good, good. Oh yes, I almost forgot. Master Grom grabbed Emery's wrist, placed his palm on top of Emery, and both symbols glowed for a moment. He said, "Okay, check your palm now. You are hereby invited into the Apothecary Institute. Accept." Of course Emery would accept the offer. He needed this. You are now an Apothecary Apprentice, rank 1. Now, that is settled. Until next year then. Emery was over the moon now that he had completed one of the objectives to pass the first year's requirements, to be accepted in any institution. All that he needed to accomplish was to increase his spirit power by using the potions he had received. Cedric sighed after the dwarf had left. He commented, "Master Grom thinks he's so slick and could whisper without anyone hearing them. I presume he had asked you to do something for him about a certain woman. Had he?" "How did you know, Senior?" Emery asked, stupefied. It's no secret the Master has a huge fondness towards beautiful women. And since you're a first-year acolyte, I also presume she's your advisor. That'd make sense the most. Anyway, we shouldn't burn any more daylight. Let's start now, shall we? Emery took out a bottle from his pouch, hanging on his waist, and Cedric nodded. Ah, green essence potion, the reward for collecting 4-leaf moon clovers. Emery couldn't help but think how smart Cedric was as he popped open the container. Could that not wait, though? I mean, it's best we get the orientation done first. Emery shook his head. I'm still a first-rank acolyte, Senior. It's better I get this one done first before doing anything else, Emery said before chugging down the bitter green liquid up to the last drop. He thought the potion didn't have an effect on his body after he had placed the empty bottle back in the pouch when his guts suddenly warmed and sent a wonderful electrifying sensation throughout all parts of his body, including the tips of his toes and fingers. He then checked his status and read the following. Spirit power has increased by 2 points. You have succeeded in reaching 2nd rank acolyte. Battle power has increased by 1 point. Emery Ambrose. Battle power 16. Spirit power 30. Rank 2 acolyte. Rank 1 apprentice, apothecary. Congratulations. You have passed all the requirements for first-year acolytes in the academy. All first-year acolytes who have passed will gather first thing tomorrow morning. Just by drinking 1 bottle, Emery felt revitalized for the day, and the dark circles underneath his eyes had disappeared. The breakthrough to 2nd rank had also increased his battle power, since when a person crosses a certain limit of spirit power, so does the physical attributes. Emery twiddled the remaining bottles in his pouch. Even though he was determined to share it with Mags, he became tempted to drink all of them at once, thinking if he drank the 8, would he break through to 3rd rank? Emery imagined it with a smile and forgot for a moment where he was when he realized Cedric was still waiting for him. I see. Reaching your 2nd rank on your last day. You are probably the most untalented acolyte I've ever seen. Looks like you're finished, though. Let's go. It's already noon at the moment. Emery didn't mind Cedric's remark and said, Yes, thank you for waiting. Don't worry, I'm on my 4th year here, and I have more time to spend. It's actually your time that's limited. Cedric then invited Emery to walk through the Institute of Apothecary. The senior proceeded to explain that even though it was the people on the front line that won the war, without the support of the path of crafting, no troops would simply dare to just go to the battlefield. The path of crafting is the art, the creation, and the core of everything. There are dozens of institutions in the path of crafting, but Apothecary is one of the 3 major crafting institutions, Cedric said. How long till be able to create something like this green essence potion? Emery asked. Well, it all depends on the potion's strength. Tell me, how many points did you receive? 2 points from 28 to 30. That's low. I guess Master Grom gave you the low-level 1-inch, Cedric said, as they walked into one of those moving stairs. That potion isn't hard to make, but its issue is the main ingredient. What about a potion that can increase bloodline power? Emery asked, remembering last night's event. That one is much harder to make. On top of its rare ingredients, it needs to be brewed for months and requires special tools to make. Finally, they arrived in a large hall like a palace library that was filled with imposing shelves and rich book collections. After Cedric spoke to the receptionist summoned several items, and he passed them to Emery. These are the starting equipment for a Rank 1 apprentice. Emery received a set of clothes that is slightly different from the acolyte outfit he was wearing. This uniform had the same emblem Cedric had, but with the number 1 underneath the emblem. Emery also received 2 scrolls, and when he opened it, Cedric was taller than Emery by at least a head and had the typical air of a handsome and fresh aura, which matched with his long wavy hair. On top of that, the acolytes Cedric had greeted seemed to be respectful of him, even though they seemed to be of the same age. After they had reached the receptionist, Cedric talked to the dwarf, and the receptionist summoned a couple of items from his dimensional ring, which Cedric handed over to Emery after. Emery received the items, and as he stared at the new set of uniform along with 2 scrolls sitting on top, only then it somehow dawned on him that he had actually reached the 2nd rank acolyte and became an apprentice in an institution. He had made it. He shook off his thoughts, and when he unrolled the 2 scrolls, the parchments vanished into thin air while a new notification popped out in his mind. Universal Flora Knowledge, Rank 1. Analyze Flora, Rank 1. The circle with a straight line, cutting the symbol in half on his hand glowed and formed new tiny images of markings on the edges. Emery focused his thoughts on the symbol and saw a variety list of plants along with their uses and where to find them, including the 4-leaf moon clover he had been tasked to gather last night. Do you have any crafting or potion-making experience? Emery was about to answer yes, but decided against it. Although he had experimented with concocting potions with the ingredients he had found and equipment back home, it was severely limited. Mainly, he was only able to create potions that warmed their bodies during the freezing winter. Hence, Emery felt his experience need not be conveyed. Not really, Senior. That's understandable. Normally, our institute doesn't allow apprentices to touch the cauldron until reaching rank 3, Cedric answered in reply, while nodding. Then, Senior, what are we doing until then? You will be assisting the senior apprentices and collecting enough contribution points to increase your rank. Contribution points? Cedric's eyes twitched. I see. I understand now. Since you don't even know about this, I'm assuming you came from a lower world, yes? He then sighed and added, I wonder how you're going to succeed in this academy. Certainly, Adept Cedric. The apprentice then placed a translucent crystal similar to the one Emery had in his private quarters. Please, the apprentice said, gesturing at the glowing ball. Emery laid down his uniform on the counter first, and then touched it as instructed. New information appeared in front of him. Apothecary store. Herbs, tools, potions, knowledge. A long list of items was shown, and almost everything written had a number written on its side. Of course, Emery couldn't understand most of the words. Emery selected the Knowledge tab and immediately saw the names of the 2 scrolls he had received before. They were situated on top of the list under the basic scrolls for Beginner Apothecary Apprentice. Universal Flora Knowledge, Rank 1 to 500 Spirit Stones. Analyze Flora, Rank 1 to 500 Spirit Stones. Emery had no prior knowledge of what a Spirit Stone was, but he felt like this would be an important thing to keep track of. He asked, "What are these Spirit Stones?" Cedric no longer appeared surprised, but Emery could tell he was getting slightly tired of explaining every single thing. That's the universal currency the whole academy uses, as well as other Magus academies in the galaxy. Spirit Stones are the culmination of humankind's ingenuity. They can be exchanged into contribution points in a 1-to-1 ratio. Think of it as a reward whenever you're finishing a task or a mission. Just note that you can exchange contribution points into Spirit Stones, but not the other way around. We don't want spoiled, rich nobles buying their way into the top now, do we? Cedric then showed Emery how to access the point counter by using a tattoo on his hand. Emery Ambrose. Contribution point 0. Tasks and missions are not available for first-year acolytes. The best thing about being selected into this Magus Academy is even if you don't have spirit stones or any contribution points, the Academy will pay all these starting items for you. Just like the items you received just now, and it's all the same with all institutions and paths, crafting, combat, or the elementals. Emery suddenly realized something important. He wanted to ask Cedric that even though he had already passed the Academy's requirement, he still hadn't succeeded in being accepted into any of the elemental institutions. Hence, he was still unable to do the basic spells of the elements he had an affinity with like the others. His mind wondered what would be the best way to receive these benefits on his last day. Emery had been going around from Darkness Institute to Plant Institute and then this Golden City. He was concerned that even if he were to take portals, he wouldn't have enough time to pass the tests and get acceptance for those spells. He reluctantly asked about his problem to Cedric as well. I don't think you will be able to do so. As you've said, each institution has their own unique examinations before they accept you. I'm not sure whether they'll allow you to do it on the last minute, especially on the last day, but of course you can try your luck. Emery remembered about the Earth Institute test on moving the rock. There should be other similar tests with all the other institutions. Not only was the time short, he wasn't even sure he could move the rock. He was starting to feel helpless again. He still hadn't slept, and even though the potion gave him a burst of energy, his mind was drained to the most it could muster. Should he just give up hope on learning spells before returning to Earth? Dear me, you are so hopeless. I can't help you much about the other things outside the apothecary. However, this is Golden City. You can find the answer to almost anything in here, Cedric said proudly. Emery liked where this was going as Cedric answered what he seemed to have on mind. All right, since I'm feeling a bit generous today, I'll take you to a place where they can help magi such as you. Cedric took Emery out of the building and walked amongst the varying people in the city until they soon arrived at a building that was no less crowded than the Crafting Institute building. A lot of traffic was happening as Emery and Cedric neared the building made of stone and steel. Various people with all sorts of appearances, wearing different uniforms, and some of which Emery didn't recognize, entered and exited the building nonstop. What place is this? He asked. This is one of the representative branches for all magi and acolytes in our galaxy specific to this city. We mostly come to this place to accept missions or use facilities that are similar to the elemental institutions, Cedric answered. When Emery entered the building, the smell of ale, noisy clanking of cups and plates, and the chattering of gossiping men and women on the side all welcomed him. It was just like one of the taverns the peasants loved going to after their day's work situated in the middle of his father's estate. But this place appeared more sophisticated with its classy tables, colorful curtains by the windows, and shiny floorings. Many people who looked like magi and acolytes were busy with their own activities. When they saw Emery and Cedric's uniforms, it fell silent for a moment before returning to its usual liveliness. Walk proud, Emery. Many of these people dreamt to be a part of our prestigious academy, even more within the crafting institution. Follow me, Cedric briefly explained. After passing through the main hall, the noises died down when they entered another room. Cedric said, "This is the highlight of this place for all acolytes and magi alike." They made their way toward behind a counter in the corner, which was manned by what appeared to be a half-breed, red-skinned human with two horns protruding upwards from his head. The man greeted the recently arrived Emery and Cedric with a sour face. "What do you want?" "It is also nice to see you again, Eon," said Cedric, not minding the rough tone of the horn man. "I'm hoping you can help my friend here from the apothecary, who has just reached rank 2 acolyte today. We're looking for you to confirm and give him his starting package." "I could do the test here," Emery blurted out with a tint of happiness in his voice. "Well, not exactly, but that's what the guild is for. Do you know how many magi are in our galaxy? Too many to count, that's for sure. With that in mind, can you imagine all this magi and acolytes from other worlds or planets returning to a centralized headquarters every time their rank got upgraded and finished a task or a mission? It'll be too much, But fortunately, there are thousands of these guilds over our galaxy. And with our academy being the top amongst all of them, it shouldn't be that surprising our golden city has its own, Cedric explained with a haughty look. So, are you just going to stand there and chat in my face or what? Said the horned red-skinned acolyte. You want my job easier? Easy, just leave, Aeon exclaimed, but Cedric didn't budge nor looked offended. Aeon turned his attention to Emery and said, You let me see your palm. Emery did, as Aeon asked. The man then said, First year acolyte, 4 affinities with a beaptitude. That's a terrible combination for the Academy's acolyte. You must have been very busy the last few days. And although you've reached rank 2, it's unfortunate that you're not eligible to receive the starting pack. What? What? Emery asked. Aeon moved closer. His protruding horns that looked like a goat's horns was only an inch away from Emery's face. The grumpy face of the half-breed seemed to have wrinkled further as he inspected Emery's stats further before showing the stats to Emery himself. Emery Ambrose, 15 years old, battle power 16, spirit power 30, spirit aptitude B, spirit affinity, earth, water, plant, and darkness. Earth spirit, initial stage, incomplete. Water spirit, initial stage, incomplete. Plant spirit, initial stage, incomplete. Darkness spirit, inestimable. Cedric opened his mouth for a brief moment, as if he wanted to say something, but Emery caught the sharp look of this red-skinned man looking at Cedric, making him close his mouth once more. Bah, it's just a basic mistake of young acolytes coming from lower worlds. I believe you didn't achieve the spirit power breakthrough with a natural way, right? The reason why I believe that is you have the required spirit power needed. That's good, but your understanding of the elements is low. I don't have to explain what incomplete means, do I? Emery shook his head and said, I understand, senior. But what about inestimable? Aeon gave a thought before answering. It's quite odd, but also not uncommon. It would often show from young acolytes who have a very bad understanding or no understanding of the element at all. Then it clicked in Emery's mind. He indeed hadn't meditated in front of the Darkness Origin Stone yet, and it had indeed been true that his breakthrough in spirit power was due to a green Essence Potion, not from the understanding of the elements. It was understandable that his darkness would be inestimable. Aeon continued speaking. For a Beaptitude Acolyte, it should take you a couple of days to learn each element, but with your 4 affinities, I reckon it'd be much more difficult than usual. If you're diligent enough, however, you should be able to master any one of your elements in 2 weeks. Once you have sufficient understanding of at least one elemental spirit, return here to receive your invitation and starting pack. However, Emery didn't even have 2 days, especially 2 weeks. He would have plenty of time to train back in Britain, but what's the point in mastering the elements, but not having the spells to use? Emery became disheartened again when Cedric, standing next to him, said, Looks like Horny Boy has finished his explanation. Aeon grunted. I guess it's my turn to speak. Cedric looked at Emery with a wide smile and said, I have a proposal for you, Emery. Since that is out of the way, and since he looks busy again, I guess it's my turn to speak. Cedric looked at Emery with a wide smile and said, I have a proposal for you, Emery. And may I know what's on your mind, senior? Emery asked, facing Cedric now after removing the status screen from his view. Okay, I know today's your last day, and I'm guessing you would like to acquire some spells before returning to your world, right? Said Cedric, as if he knew everything going on in Emery's mind. Emery confirmed Cedric's deduction with a nod. Cedric kept his wide smile before turning to Aeon once more, who was busy writing some stuff in the ledger. He said with a teasing look, Oh, my wonderful friend, may I use the Magus Crystal, please? Whatever, replied Aeon, not looking up. Emery realized that even though Aeon treated Cedric harshly, Cedric didn't seem to mind it as if they were good friends. These two people might be closer than he thought. Cedric then proceeded to touch the crystal ball, and information appeared similar to the one in the apothecary store. Magus Guild Crystal. Mission Store Network. The Mission tab, as the name implied, was a list of missions where an acolyte or a magus would be able to take once they were eligible and receive contribution points, or other compensations after turning over a completed mission. Network was similar to a facility where people could communicate over long distances while the store was a tab to buy Magus equipment. "Look at this," said Cedric, clicking the store menu. "This is the list for the hundreds of spells that's available to buy for all acolytes and Magus to buy under the 10 elements. All of them are basic spells, but this should be more than enough for you. The guild doesn't have the higher or much more powerful spells because those are exclusively retrieved from the institutions." Emery began to browse the list Cedric had pulled up, all to his heart's content. Stone Skin, rank 1 earth spell, 100 spirit stone. Mud Wall, rank 1 earth spell, 100 spirit stone. Glowstone, rank 1 earth spell, 100 spirit stone. Spiritual Seed, rank 1 plant spell, 100 spirit stone. Nature Sense, rank 1 plant spell, 100 spirit stone. Entangle, rank 1 plant spell, 100 spirit stone. Cloud Mist, rank 1 water spell, 100 spirit stone. Hydraulic Push, rank 1 water spell, 100 spirit stone. Water Whip, rank 1 water spell, 100 spirit stone. Cedric's eyes beamed and said, "It's simple as a matter of fact. I'll buy it for you." Emery expected that Cedric would want something in return. After all, nothing was free in this world. He cleared his throat and asked, "What do you want for an exchange?" The adept alchemist smiled broadly, apparently waiting for this question. "Every year, Master Grum always gives the same mission to all acolytes in the Plant Institute who are not part of the path of crafting. And seeing how you felt your pouch after taking one, I know for sure that you have more than one of those potions. I'll trade you 1 green essence potion for 1 spell. So what say you?" Emery then realized why Cedric had bothered to go out of his way to accompany him here. If he knew any better, Emery would think this was Cedric's goal from the moment Cedric had witnessed him drink the green essence potion. "As my junior from the Apothecary Institute, I am willing to help you and trade that low-quality green essence potion with a spell that could be useful for you back in your own world. What do you think? Let's seal the deal, shall we?" It had been a few days since Emery had been thinking about what to do once he returned to Britain. He didn't have a home to call anymore, and only 7 days had passed after he had been transported to this magical place. It still was highly possible those marauders who had burned his house and murdered his father might get wind of his return, and that'd mean he'd be in danger once again. Even though it was true he had better physique than before, he knew he didn't have the capability to fight or maybe outrun them again. Now that a few days had passed, he had a much clearer view of that event and could somewhat figure there was a stronger power behind that attack, since the marauders specifically attacked them while shouting, "Kill the Croton lovers." He had never heard of that term, much less about hearing how his father's estate, the home of the renowned knight with the title of the Lion's Fong, had been attacked with such reasoning behind it. Emery determinedly opened his small pouch from his waist and took out the 8 small green containers. He had received 9 bottles, and if he shared the remaining with Mags or Cole, whose status was still unknown, at the very least he felt entitled to 3 of these bottles. One of them had already been consumed, so he could only exchange at least 2 bottles at most. His eyes switched between the bottles and the list of spells. Believing that his needs for the spells were more urgent, Emery decided to hand over 2 bottles. As he kept 2 of them and put the rest back in the bag, he stretched out his hand to Cedric when Aeon shut his ledger loudly, startling Emery. "Hold it right there," exclaimed Aeon, taking a look at the potions. "Don't be stupid, kid. That potion is worth at least 5 times of a single basic spell." "Hold it right there," exclaimed Aeon, glancing at the potions Emery had withdrawn. "Don't be stupid, kid. That potion is worth at least 5 times of a single basic spell." Emery stopped midway and noticed how Cedric clicked his tongue on the corner of his eye. Cedric immediately tried to defend himself and said, "Oh, no. If it was a normal potion, perhaps. But these are low-quality green essence potions. They're worth at most 2 spells." Aeon ignored Cedric and asked Emery to hand over the potion to him instead. "Kid, let me see those potions." Emery did as Aeon had requested. Cedric, on the other hand, appeared to have furrowed his brows. Cedric said, Okay. I'm willing to exchange you 2 spells for 1 potion. That should be a fair deal. Aeon closely examined the green essence potions. He gave it a twirl and a sniff after opening one of them before striking a sharp stare at Cedric. He said, "You are really shameless, aren't you?" Emery thought it'd be better to stay silent, as 2 people argued with each other. He hadn't spent enough time in this academy and knew too little to make a well-informed decision. If he were to study in this place for a longer time in the future, he would need to be careful from being taken advantage of easily, as well as people whom he could trust and rely on. He wouldn't get far if he only had himself to rely on. Emery received the potions back from Aeon and laid it down on the table, prompting the adept alchemist and the red-skinned, half-human from bickering. "Respected senior, I have these 2 potions to spare. Could you please help me choose a few spells you think that'll be suitable for me? I think 2 or 3 spells will be sufficient without having to incur too many losses for my senior alchemist here." Aeon gave his first smile since the time Emery and Cedric had walked in here a few minutes ago. He smirked at Cedric once more and said, "Don't worry, kid. Cedric here is a successful craftsman and a shrewd businessman. Like I said, even with just 1 of these potions, he wouldn't lose anything since he has so many spirit stones." He opened the spell list and began to give suggestions to Emery. "For rank 1 spells, I recommend Stone Skin for your earth affinity. It boasts the most physical and magical defense amongst all other defensive types of spell. Not only it gives you protection, but it also increases your physical strength. No questions about the defensive spell, because it's the best that you can have. Next thing you need are offensive spells. I recommend Leaves of Steel or Whip Splash, which are both rank 1 spells for your plant or water affinities. It costs a bit more than the basic skill since they're a bit more complicated but more powerful." Cedric was about to say something when Aeon gave him a deadly look, making him hold his tongue, so Cedric had to make do with a sigh instead. Aeon returned speaking to Emery, giving his last bits of suggestions. "Lastly, since you have the 3 spirit manuals from the institutes, except for the Darkness Spirit Manual initial stage, I'd highly recommend getting it since it's inexpensive. Not to mention, you'll need this to start connecting with the element of the dark all around us. On top of this, better also get a utility spell like Dark Smoke, which will be useful for running away from undefeatable opponents. The smoke not only disturbs your opponent's sight, but it can also confuse their mind for a brief moment." He clapped and started to select each of the spells in the list he had advised for Emery to get. 1 Spirit Manual, Darkness Spirit Manual, Initial Stage. 1 utility spell, Dark Smoke. 1 defensive spell, Stone Skill. And 2 offensive spells, Leaves of Steel and Whip Splash. All of them should amount to 650 spirit stones. "What do you think?" Cedric mumbled as he checked his palm, probably checking the stones he had on him. He gave an annoyed nod, indicating he was somewhat fine with this transaction when Aeon remembered something and asked them to wait a second. Aeon went inside the door behind his counter and returned with a box with intricate greenish carvings on the edges. He said, "Actually, I think you'll like this better than the offensive plant spell. Fragmentation, rank 1 plant spell." After Aeon had opened the box and the name of the scroll came into view, Cedric slammed the counter and said, Hey, if you include that then, the total amount should be 1,000 spirit stones. I'll basically not get a profit for bringing him here. I won't do it." Aeon smirked wider than he had earlier at Cedric and said, "Oh ho, 2 can play this game, pretty boy. If you don't want it, then I'll buy these spells for him." "What do you think, kid? What does the spell do?" Emery asked. "It's a rare basic spell for plant magi. Since you're an apothecary apprentice, this would help you tremendously since the spell will help you dissect a plant and separate their components. Of course, you'll still have to practice the actual deed, but having a guideline where to separate parts of plants will make your apprentice work much easier." Emery indeed was grateful to Cedric for bringing him here. However, since Cedric was no longer to pay for his spells and Aeon was offering, he better grab this opportunity for himself. He only gave 2 words to Aeon, "Thank you." Even though he no longer had 2 bottles of green essence potions, which he could confidently claim as his own, Emery was quite satisfied to get 4 spells out of it as a replacement. Emery took scrolls, Used them on the spot. Emery thanked both Aeon and Cedric, who was still brooding about Aeon stealing his client, and decided to return to his resting place. The sun had started to set as he stepped out of the Magus Guild building.